Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. We have a extremely, I would argue, provocative topic that we're going to be discussing today, particularly with my good brother from Chi-Town. Shout out to the Windy City, but Adilo Kenyatta. And we're going to be having a conversation regarding why Black atheism matters and why Black atheist matters. As many of us know, when we talk about the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion, we tend to find ourselves in situations in which oftentimes many of the free thinkers, many of us who are engaged in activism, many even call it Blacktivism, being a Blacktivist, are shunned when they don't have a religious following or persuasion. We know that for many, there's a belief that in order to be engaged in this type of critical work of trying to, of course, reassert and, of course, reaffirm and restore African people to their traditional greatness, there has to be a fundamental core belief in God, right? I can recall that I had a conversation here on my platform maybe about a month and a half ago where we had a very rather rigorous debate regarding does spirituality need to be part of the movement for African redemption? And of course, I argue vehemently, absolutely not. And so we're going to get into that, but I want to give my brother from Chi-Town, Brother Adilo Kenyatta, the resident Pan-Africanist in the house, as I was good in his times too. If you could introduce yourself, let people know a little bit about yourself before we get the conversation started.
Hi, I'm Bro Diallo. You can find me across social media at Bro Diallo or at Diallo Kenyatta. I've been, I think I've been an atheist since 12 years old, but I didn't exit the religion until around 14. Took me a couple of years to get out of the church. I did explore for many years after that African spirituality, various African systems from West, Central, and of course Kemetic North Africa, along with Diasporan, Santeria, and Vodun. Spiritual systems, but more so from an anthropological, historical, and cultural point of view, but not as a true believer.
Yes,
I've also, for many years, have examined the belief systems of various cults and cult figures and the negative impacts on cults and religion on the Black community as a whole, but on the Black liberation struggle, the Black power struggle, and the Pan-African movement in particular.
Very good, very good. And so real quick, I'm going to go over the ground rules. We always got to do some housekeeping. As you all know here at Lumumba Speaks, we believe in diversity of thought, right? So, but I do not believe in alternative facts. So you can come on the platform. I believe that the link is in the description. I'll put it in the chat as well. And if you want to push back against what I and Brother Diallo has to have to say, that's quite all right. We believe in diversity of thought, but we do not believe in alternative facts, right? As you all know, no racial epithets of any kind can be used when referencing Black people on my platform. I don't allow it to take place at any time you're upset, right? Irrespective of one's geographical place of origin, where they're currently living, where they're maybe residing, where they come from, irrespective of their political views, I do not allow people to use racial epithets of any kind when referencing African people, even if the person doesn't think that they are African, right? But this is we're for Black empowerment, so we want to leave that type of business out on the street. And last but not least, facts over feelings, right? So here we want to be rooted in factual information. We like to undergird our conversations, of course, in scholarship. And so we want to do facts over feelings. And once again, as I always state, you cannot make a claim on my platform that is patently false. If you do, I will shut you down. As you know, I am responsible for the claims that are being made and disseminated on my platform. And so, of course, I do not want to have that undermine my standing as a budding scholar. With that being said, I always give an example of someone making a claim that is patently false, and I would take umbrage with. This is so a good example would be the great debate in basketball: who is the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James, right? I would care less who you believe is the GOAT, right? But if you were to state that Michael Jordan is not the GOAT because he only won one championship, that would be making a claim that is patently false, right? Irrespective of your opinion, the person is making a claim that's patently false. So as I stated before, listen, diversity of thought is quite all right. No racial epithets of any kind, irrespective of how you feel about the person, facts over feelings. And of course, no claims that are patently false. We believe in diversity of thought, but we do not believe in alternative facts. So with that being said, Brother Dialogue, you mentioned that you believe that religious beliefs tend to inhibit Black progress, particularly in Black and African liberation movements. Could you give me some examples of that?
I don't state that as a belief. I state that as a fact.
Okay.
Because many of the religions, the core tenets of the religion, discourage rebellion. People, like when I assert my atheism and my Pan-African ideology, people often like to point out individuals like our ancestors that were religious believers,
yes,
like Harriet Tubman or Nat Turner,
yes,
or even some of the Haitian revolutionaries. But I often have to remind them, according to their own doctrine and faith, that if Christianity were true, Nat Turner would be in sin, in violation of God, right, by decapitating his master. Right. Along with Harriet Tubman for escaping her master. And not only for escaping her master would Harriet Tubman be in violation of her tenets, she would be in violation of her tenets in being a leader of men and being out front of men and guiding men. Right. So if we were, as African people, and I also note that many of these ancestors, revolutionary ancestors who did hold to religious faith, or as more accurately, religious delusions, they were very bad at it. Malcolm X was a Muslim, but he was really bad at Islam, and what we admire most about them is rooted in their taking deliberate steps to violate their
radicalism,
faith and belief systems.
Yes, absolutely. Their radicalism. So I think those are some great points. I've always made the argument. People say, well, what about Marcus Garvey, right? He was a Roman Catholic. Malcolm X was a Muslim, so on and so forth. And I always tell people that, one of the things about Marcus Garvey is that we know Marcus Garvey's movement after he was incarcerated and, of course, deported to Jamaica. And he later ended up in the UK. That Carlos Cooks, many people may be unaware, but I'm sure you are aware, Carlos Cooks is considered the ideological son of Marcus Garvey. And he was the one who was particularly responsible trying to keep the Garvey movement moving forward after he was, of course, deported from America with the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement. And many people took umbrage in the Garvey movement that Carlos Cooks removed God from the one God, one aim, one destiny, to one goal, one cause, one destiny, right? And of course, Marcus Garvey wrote to him and said, if I would have known what I knew now, I would have done the same as you years before. So we tend to find that, unfortunately, particularly with our people, but we can even extrapolate this to human beings, that many oftentimes will view God as a magic genie that will solve problems that they can and should and oftentimes would solve for themselves if they didn't have this belief in this delusional higher power.
Right. And I think it's also, even prior to Garvey's departure as head of the UNIA, Garvey stated in his philosophies and opinions that he is in fact a Christian, but his organization was strictly secular. It
Mhm.
was a sexually, it had a secular mission, had a secular hierarchical structure. And I, for one, do not refuse to organize, coordinate, cooperate with um, religious people or people who hold to religious belief systems, but I do absolutely refuse to engage in any non-secular political organizing or Black Power movements that aren't fundamentally secular and operate as a secular movement. So secularism is not the same as atheism. You
This
can
is true.
be a person of faith and still engage in secular movements and secularism in terms of politics. And I respect and accept that, and I believe that is absolutely necessary. I don't think any religious or faith-based movement are going to ever ultimately um, liberate us. Most
Absolutely.
religious movements do what they call lateral movements. They don't move you up, and they don't free you. They just put you under a new envelope or a new umbrella of oppression.
Absolutely. We see this a lot of times in the African American community. Individuals. Hey, I like the mug, by the way. Okay.
Oh,
Hey, like the mug. Hey, you can let people know.
AfricanWorldOrder.com.
Let people know where they can buy that real quick.
All right. Oh, you can go to AfricanWorldOrder.com shirts. It's we call it the aesthetics of liberation. You can get Bro Diallo specific merch, or you can get merch that is themed for liberation struggles and also to articulate or display ideological positions such as anti-capitalism, pro-environmentalism, and pan-African ideology and art. So
Very good.
AfricanWorldOrder.com.
AfricanWorldOrder.com. So very quickly, Brother Design says, I agree with the brother. Religious doctrines teach Africans we can get free when we die. Shaking my head. Absolutely. Right. And I even argue, we talk about this lateral movement. I always would tell people, you see a lot of brothers and sisters become militant. They learn about Malcolm and they go from being a Christian to being a Muslim. And I say, well, that's a lateral move. You went from one Abrahamic anti-Black faith to another. Right. And I can even recall there was a time when I was an undergrad, and of course, I spent most of my free time in the Black Culture Center, right? And there was a question about how to deal with trauma or issues in life, and the director of the center, bless her heart, was a Christian, and she was steeply rooted in Christian theology, right? And she said, well, that's because you were always either going through something or just getting out of something. I said, well, listen, that sounds like someone who's living a very traumatic and dysfunctional lifestyle. I said, that's Christian theology, has no place here where we're talking about the liberation and elevation of African people. I said, we need to get far away from that type of traumatic type thinking where you're always going through some type of storm. Right. I said, so, these are some of the issues that we tend to find psychologically with our people. But I also know that you have, and we've had some previous conversations where you've argued that teaching children religion or the belief in God, in your opinion, is tantamount to child abuse. And I want to know if you can, really extrapolate.
Yeah. It's psycho-emotional blackmail and it's psycho-emotional abuse. Absolutely. But I do have to couch that. It depends on what theology. Theologies that teach that there is an omnipresent, all-knowing God that is measuring and calculating and cataloging all of your actions and will send you to an eternal punishment, is absolutely inappropriate to teach. And if you told a child that for any other reason, if you told a child that if you make bad grades, you will be punished, you will be burned, you are evil. If you told a child that they didn't practice proper hygiene, that they were evil. If you told a child anything else, but if you tell a child they don't have proper faith in God and adhere to God's rules, that they die, they will burn forever. And even if they're not burning, they are distanced from their ultimate creator. We wouldn't accept telling children that. And we all should reflect on our own childhoods as now I lay me down to sleep. I pray my Lord, the Lord, my soul to keep if I should die before I wake. Even putting ongoing thoughts of death and perishing, not just sin, living in sin, but dying in sin and eternal punishment and distance from your creator. That is an absolutely abusive ideology. And the only reason it's not viewed as abusive is because it is so well saturated within the culture. But if many people within Christian or Judeo-Christian culture went to, let's say, a Buddhist culture, which has its own, wretched concepts. Hinduism has its wretched concepts. So you'll find people that believe in the Christian absurdities and the Christian delusions can look and properly evaluate the absurdities of the Hindu religions. And the Hindus come here and look at, Judeo-Christian traditions and practices as it relates to children. But they have a blind spot because it is normalized within them. So that when a practice of abuse has saturated and normalized throughout culture, and moving beyond just the ideological and emotional abuse of telling someone, if you disobey me, like my son has to take out the trash, and if he doesn't take out the trash, he disappoints me. And beyond that, I don't say, well, you've sinned against your father and you are unclean, you're in a state of sin, and if you died on the way to school after failing to take out the trash, you would burn in hell for disobedience. But the Bible, the Quran, and Torah also advocate not just the physical beating of children, but the murder of children. Children are defined by the Old Testament as...
And real quick, and I don't mean to cut you off, but because I really want you to really crystallize what this point right here, because this is oftentimes overlooked when we're talking about the religious texts, the Torah, the Bible, and of course the Quran. So one, I'm gonna let you finish, but also if you could talk about why do you think this is overlooked?
Well, it's overlooked because, like I said, people are indoctrinated, and the purpose of indoctrination is to override people's cognition. Okay. You don't have to indoctrinate people into things that are readily acceptable.
Right.
You don't have to indoctrinate. You can educate people into things that are sensible, rational, and healthy. You can simply educate them or inform them or model the proper behavior. But if it is not appropriate or proper behavior, you have to go through systematic breakdown of that person's cognitive ability and then restructuring them and building up a crystallized behavior pattern that is unquestionable. Right. All-knowing, all-powerful, unquestionable.
Right. So logic is the enemy of faith, as they say.
Right. And so, but I always say everybody loves Christianity until some Christian shit happens. If you look back at what's that guy, Kirk Franklin, yes, and he was cursing out his son, and everyone was outraged and gasping about the brutal threats he was leveling against his son. But I'm like,
that's the Old Testament.
Where does that violate the Bible? But didn't Jesus say he didn't come to replace the law? A lot of Christians like to, look back at the Jews or Orthodox Christians and be like, yeah, we have a New Testament. The New Testament is an addition, not a departure from the Old Testament. The only thing the New Testament gave you was a transformation of salvation as opposed to burnt sacrifices. Jesus was the final sacrifice. That's all. So the Old Testament still applies to Christians. Mm-hmm. So the children being your property who are worthy of death if they disobey the Father is still doctrine. It's still dogma. It still stands.
Absolutely. So let me ask you.
On top of that, didn't Jesus say he come to turn father against mother and father against son and to render families apart? Christian family values are obscene. It's absurd that the Christian right-wing party in the United States has been able to erect itself as the family values party, because when you really look at family values, it's a murderous dictatorship. It's a hostile, murderous dictatorship of many wives and many concubines in the Bible.
This is true. So let me ask you this. And once again, we know that right, wrong, indifferent, most Black organizations, Black movements have this religious background or component. What are your views on Black liberation theology?
There's no such thing as liberation theology. I think that liberation theology was great propaganda. But again, if you look at the popular liberation theologists, the standing church abandoned them. The organized church abandoned those ministers and priests who were working amongst the people in the non-alignment movement in Latin America. And some people like to pretend that the civil rights movement that was led by ministers was liberation theology, or even the Black Muslim. But in actuality, by definition, you can't be theological and liberated. Theology binds you to some of the strictest, harshest rules and some of the strictest, harshest consequences that man has ever conceptualized.
True.
Theocratic rule, theocratic governance, theocratic law is brutal and unyielding. So
Absolutely.
how can you be theocratic and liberated?
So that's a hell of an oxymoron. It's quite the contradiction.
But I think it's great because the Catholic Church later, after turning its back on some of the monks and some of the priests that were working with the anti-colonial movements in Latin America, and the Baptist Convention, after kicking Dr. King to the curb, a lot of these established churches, when these people became martyrs or heroes amongst the people, they flipped back around, just like the Nation of Islam that mocked Malcolm's death and then tried to turn around and take credit for making
Absolutely.
Malcolm. So a lot of what the liberation theology actually is when the heat is off, the established church or the established religious institution turns around and be like, oh yeah. But in reality, theology is an asset and an ally of the state. It is an asset and an ally of the elites. And they have always, the formal organized church has never used its considerable resources to rise up and destroy systems of oppression, because the church is an institution in a system of oppression.
Now you're gonna, upset some people with such a concept. I've always argued that the church, and
I'm gonna pray on it.
I know. I love it. So I remember having a conversation with my brother, my actual blood brother. We share the same, of course, mom and dad. And he was going in on me, how could I have these views of the church and religion? Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, well, first and foremost, we grew up in the Black Christian church, the Negro church. And I said, this was a site of anti-Black violence from a theological, historical, and even cultural standpoint. It was vehemently anti-Black. So you can make the argument the institution that is supposed to save our souls was actually the instrument of our own damnation. Because we're learning to hate ourselves in this very institution. And when people hate themselves, they engage in racially disempowering, self-defeating, and self-destructive behavior. So I can recall when I was, and this is back when I was in the devil's military, I was in the National Guard, and my son was born. And we're on the bus about to go to annual training this summertime. And I'm telling his mom, like, don't take him to church. And the people on the bus are like, you don't want your son going to church? What? I said, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't want your child in church as well. Right? And so now we can even and we could talk about, this concept of self-abnegation, in which you have to distance yourself from your history, heritage, and culture in order to get closer to the so-called omnipresent divine being, in which you're really practicing what Dr. Jacob Carruthers argues is a form of institutionalized cultural nationalism, right? But I also want to talk about some of the tangible harms that, particularly for children who are growing up in religious institutions, have to encounter. And I know you've spoken about this before. I know I've reached out and spoken about this with different individuals regarding these, not only physical abuse that oftentimes children face in religious institutions, but also the sexual abuse that children oftentimes face in religious institutions. Could you speak a little bit more on that?
Well, every single religious institution, the Christian and its various sects of Christianity, from the Orthodox, the Baptist Convention, to the more recent Christian cults of Mormonism and the offshoot Jehovah's Witness, every single one of them have cases that not only of individual abuse, but systemic abuse and ongoing cover-up by the church administration or leadership. Every single one of these. The Baptist Convention has hundreds of convictions, thousands of children's abused. Also, the Boy Scouts is a Christian organization. I was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout. We met in a church. It is a Christian institution. The Boy Scouts
in a junior army.
Right. It doesn't just teach you to tie knots and make fires with sticks. It teaches you Christian virtues. They have a long history of sexual and child abuse.
And correct me on this if I'm wrong, with the Boy Scouts, didn't they have to file for bankruptcy because they weren't able to pay out all of the civil suits?
Over close to $1 billion in civil suits for sexual abuse and facilitating the sexual abuse of children. The Mormon Church, I mean, do we even have to talk about the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints?
Yes, we do. Because we know that Black people are the fastest growing segment and population
of every church. You pretty much can't name a religion where black people aren't
particularly on the
overrepresented.
continent as well.
The
So
Jehovah's Witnesses, they're about to have their charter revoked and be fully outlawed in Australia. Australia
okay.
is head, and the Catholic Church is proportional as badass. Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall is proportionally as badass because they had sexual abuse defense and sexual because the Jehovah's Witness don't believe in the world, which is the government and secular society. They try to handle all issues from within. So they pretty much were addressing molestation and child abuse within the Kingdom Hall and the elders, which virtually meant chastising the child. Islam, you jump over to Islam and the madrasas, the Quranic schools, there's ongoing sexual abuse. There were several reports when U.S. soldiers would go over to places like Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, they would see young male prostitutes, and they said a big issue with that. Also Pakistan, parts of India that have Islamic communities, there's so much separation of isolation from males and females, and most young men only get to interact with women they are related to up until their marriage, that they often, as they reach puberty and start developing sexual maturity, they look around for the next best vulnerable thing because they don't have access and can't interact naturally or healthily with the opposite sex in strict Islamic society. So Islam, also the Farrakhan justified Mike Tyson's rape and said that, you know, that when Mike Tyson was alleged and convicted of rape of models, he said it was the fault of the people who let him in because he was like a wolf or a fox allowed into a chicken coop, comparing Mike Tyson being around young model contestant. Farrakhan also stated that one of the big reasons that men molest their daughters is the fault of the mothers because the mothers become out of shape. They no longer venerate the father, and the young girls venerate their fathers, and the young girls' daughters often look like the mother did when the father met them at their sexual peak. So that Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism with the concept of karmatic reincarnation and karma, saying that you'll look that when many of us are well aware, even if you don't study it, that child brothels and child prostitutes, you know that there's an international pedophile ring that operates out of parts of Hindu and Buddhist countries. This is true, where they go there to basically out in the open. And there are some journalists and activists that go there and just videotape open child prostitution on the streets and tries to get the identity of these Western men from Europe and the United States. And a lot of that is tied to the Buddhist thought that that number one, they devalue women. Women are inherently negative, and you know, the yin and the yang, the woman is the ground and all that bullshit. So even the Eastern religion, because you say a lot of black people move laterally, they jump to Islam, and then you get some black people that are slick and they abandon all Abrahamic religion and they go east and they put on the bindi and they start to do yoga and talk about karma and emptiness and all that
dumb shit. All that dumb shit.
There is not.
I'm gonna let you cook. Go right ahead.
There, except maybe Jainism and maybe some other, and I can also the African religions.
Yes, come on, man.
Based on their belief system. Abuse, systematic abuse, murder and mutilation for rituals. Related to albinos. In sub-Saharan and Eastern Africa, the mutilation of albinos and things of that nature. So even the indigenous and traditional, and we can also talk about the Kemetic cults. Asar Set Society, Bahami Temple.
We saw what happened with Dr. Malachi York. He was down there.
Malachi York, which he was a Kemetic cult, right?
Yes.
So everywhere there's not one formalized religious body that doesn't have an ongoing standing history, and it's very curious where you got people out here talking about everything from Pizzagate to Balenciaga to what's that other thing? The scandal. Drag queen story hour.
What you say? Pizzagate. Break this down for me.
That was a Q&A conspiracy. Okay. In Hillary Clinton's leaked emails, there was discussion about ordering pizza and for some type of meeting, and a QAnon code breaker said that in those pizza orders, that was code word for children. So when you saw Hillary Clinton staffers discussing pizza or trying to get food and beverages for their meetings or whatever, those were actually them ordering children for both abuse and also to sacrifice those children and to tap into their adrenal glands and get adrenochrome in order to drink the children's adrenal hormones in order to remain young and vibrant. And
It sounds like something from the Middle Ages, to be quite honest.
Well, that's the conspiracy. There's no support for any of that shit.
For this, right?
But during the 2016 lead up to and throughout the 2016 campaign and at the height of the QAnon movement, a lot of black people jumped on that as well. Because for some reason it wasn't enough for Hillary Clinton to be a racist mass incarcerator. They needed to also create this delusion of Hillary Clinton being a demonic force who sacrifices children and has code words for pizza. And it culminated in some idiot going to some pizza parlor in DC and kicking in the door with a shotgun and going into the basement and shooting in the basement, thinking that there were tied up children with tubes in their adrenal glands being abused and having their adrenal hormones drained. And that's the kind of bullshit. And all of the international bodies that work on child sex abuse and organized rings of child sexual abuse and child sexual trafficking said that these absurd, hysterical conspiracies, these nonsensical stories about fictional abuse obstruct and hinder their work to deal with the actual traffickers and abusers.
It's like someone claiming that they were raped when they really weren't. And now we have to put our time and resources towards going after someone who didn't do it when we could actually be going after someone who is.
Right, and it takes time and resources. And now there's this new Balenciaga nonsense. Now they believe that Balenciaga is trying to legalize child sex. And it blows my mind how individuals who get caught up in this nonsense, how they gloss over the tons of recorded, documented, evidentiary sources, the fact-based sources of systemic and systematic abuse to chase after these absurdist, mad stories of abuse that has never been validated. It's just people's fever pipe dreams.
Right.
I don't know how I got to that, but like I said, all of the major Abrahamic religions engage in that. And I believe that a lot of child abuse rooted in these Abraham religions is the fallacy and fiction about sex and purity. The Bible is replete with child sexual abuse and child sexual predation and incest. And you'll find these purity pledges and these purity dances and these purity rings.
I was part of a purity class when I was in and growing up in church.
Right. So these religious men preoccupy themselves with purity, and they don't want a worldly woman. They don't want an experienced woman. They want a woman that'll talk. Like I just had a brother online talking about the man is the leader in his household and the man establishes the culture in his house and the man rules the house. And I said, there's only one way for you to fulfill your, and this was a single brother with no kids, but that's how he imagined he's going to proceed. And there's only basically two ways you can establish that fantasy. Well, three. Number one, you got a woman who's going to lie to you and play you. Oh, yes, I will submit. Yes, you are the king. A woman that's going to blow smoke up your ass. A woman who is cognitively disabled.
Deficient, right.
Deficient. Or a child. Because those are the only three types of conditions where you can create this fantasy of a man-dominated dictatorship household where the woman is a docile and just thanks God for your presence and rulership.
And I always tell people, because I grew up in a patriarchal household where my dad didn't make decisions unilaterally. He would always come to us and say, so your mom and I talked, and this is what he was a discriminator, but that's what it always was.
Who wants to be around an adult? You know, the same brothers that say they want to dominate the households are the same dudes that share the memes, getting mad when a woman won't decide on what she wants to eat. You know, it's like, baby, what you want to eat? Oh, I don't know. No, you don't want to. I don't even like making decisions for my own kids. Like, I want them to think and function for themselves. I want to be able to guide and instruct them. But I don't want to say, wear this today, do that tomorrow. And when you get home, the older my children get, the less direct input I want to be able to have. What kind of individual wants to have dictatorial control over another person's life like that, even if it's especially another adult, especially your spouse? Who wouldn't want to partner with an independent thinking person with their own points of views and that can assert themselves when they need to, even if it's contrary to what you might want at that moment?
I always tell people I don't want someone who's going to be an asset and not a liability. And I always tell people, when you get with someone like that, they're going to be a liability because it's going to be like raising another child.
Right.
That's a liability. It's not an asset to me.
People who are embedded in religious delusions believe that's what, not only what they want, they believe that that's what God mandates.
Right. So
they believe that's what God mandates. And that's at the root of a lot of predation, is that men are seeking these pure, obedient, and ultimately you're going to have to get a child to really fulfill that fantasy. I think that's at the root of a lot of abuse within the faith.
So we got some people. I want you all to tap in and be part of the conversation. Brother Mufasa Shabazz says, being the head of household doesn't mean you make every decision for every single thing in the house. I think this is a straw man argument. Brother Bawana says, a lot of fairy tales are told there too. Exactly what kind of individual want that relationship dynamic, sucking my teeth. So this is Sister Hanifa. So all of you all, need you all to tap in. I'm going to put the link in the chat. I want you all to tap in, become part of this robust, intellectually rigorous conversation. And Brother Dialogue, I'm going to ask you a question. What are your thoughts on this concept and idea with the faith-based initiative? What are your thoughts on the faith-based initiative?
I hate to go there, but it's
you will have to go there. You got to go there.
It's unconstitutional. As much as I hate the founding rapists, the founding enslavers, if I were to structure a government, I would definitely make it a strictly secular government, and I would definitely put strict barriers between church and state. So according to the U.S.
But what about people that say that the country was founded on Christian values?
There's no evidence of that. Like you said, that is not, there's no evidence of that. And if you really believe the country was founded on Christian values, then you have to acknowledge that a Christian value is genocide, slavery, settler colonialism, and ecocide.
That's what it's founded on. Absolutely. Settler colonialism, genocide of
indigenous. If you want to acknowledge that those are Christian values, then I will acknowledge that the U.S. was founded on Christian values. You got to take it all. You got to take the gristle. You got to take the gristle with the bone and the meat. You got to eat it all.
Even though you don't eat meat, though. Right? So let me ask you this. You refer, I find oftentimes you refer to, maybe all the time, you refer to all religions, in particular, even religious doctrines, as cultish in nature. Could you extrapolate on why you refer to all religious and spiritual beliefs as cultish in nature, or cults in nature? And then we're going to get back to Farrakhan as well. Because, he is someone who, of course, is seen as the paragon of Black masculinity. He's supposed to be a man of faith, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So definitely want you to be able to give your perspective on faith. We've done this before, but of course, we have a lot of new viewers, and I want to make sure that they're able to hear your views, which I share many of, regarding Minister Farrakhan. But once again, cults don't cultivate, as you always say, and then we will touch on Farrakhan.
Well, and also the brother that jumped on there and said that's not what head of household means. Why didn't he drop a sentence on telling us what it is? They really slipped on us what it means.
Tap in.
Huh?
I think he's going to tap in.
All right, yeah. Because tell me what it is then, head of household. Because I'd like to know, because beyond tax form, outside of the taxes, that's what it is. It's a bureaucratic term. Head of household is a bureaucratic taxation term. It's not applied in real life. But I'm sorry, we were talking about cults.
Cults don't cultivate.
Well, I say the only difference between an established religion and a cult is the body count. When Christianity was being established, it was considered a cult, and the polytheistic religions were dominant. So when the Abrahamic religions were being founded, they were considered cults. But the fundamental thing about a cult is there's several characteristics of a cult. I'm not really going to get into the bite model, but any type of institution that is not evidence-based, that requires you to believe and to have faith, and asking you to make fundamental changes in your life and your behavior and your relationships based on something that is not evidence-based is essentially a cult.
Okay. Very good. And Brother Mufasa, he tapped back in. Brother Mufasa, I need you to tap in and be part of this conversation, brother. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. Come on, be part of the conversation. As you know, you do not have to count up.
But then you do make all the decisions. Wow, that's like a benevolent leader. I don't make me hit you. If you have veto power, then you make the sole decisions. If
We're saying that all the time. We're saying that all the time.
I will hear your pleas, my peasants, but ultimately your cries are futile. And why you? What makes you do that? I mean, what do y'all flip a coin? Why do you decide that the man has the veto power? He just restated what we said. He just tried to clean it up. And I hate CEOs. Capitalist CEOs are parasites. So if you're the CEO of your family, I hope your family gets the hell away from you.
So I would say this. I myself, as a father, have made what's the term? Executive decisions regarding my children. And their mothers even come back and said, you know what, I'm glad you did that. I don't know what I was thinking right at that time. So sometimes it is good for a person to make an executive decision, particularly if it's fact-based.
What executive? First of all, what is it? So you and your wife had a disagreement, right?
Correct.
And you brought the hammer down.
Correct.
And said, this is what it's going to be.
Correct. And she later said, you know what, you were absolutely right.
No. I'm not talking about later down the line. I'm talking about in that moment. Because me and my wife have disagreements too. But in that very moment, she was like, because you're the man, I'm going to go ahead and even though
I don't know what the reason why, but I'm just saying that's what happened. I can't tell you why she agreed with me and acquiesced, but she did.
Has the reverse ever been true?
What you mean?
Have you and her agreed and she won out?
There's been situations where she was right and I was wrong.
No, I'm not asking about who was right or who was wrong. I'm saying in the moment that you both disagree, she made executive decision that you acquiesced to.
I would say no. And I'm gonna tell you why. In my experience, and of course this is anecdotal, but in my experience, I've found situations where I've been with women, they've made executive decisions. And I'm like, I wouldn't do that if I was you. They would do it anyway. And when things crashed and burned, I was the person who was expected to then go fix it, even though I told them not to do that. This has been my experience.
I'm not talking about random women. I'm talking about your partner, your wife.
Yeah, yes, even with that. Yes.
Let's keep it limited. Let's keep it limited in scope. In the context of a family and a familial relationship, you never had an instance where you had an executive decision. You said you're using your terminology. You've never had an instance where an executive decision was impressed on you.
Yes, I have. I have.
And you have made executive decisions as well.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I can live with that.
One of the executive decisions with my ex-wife kept me from going to jail.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's not what he's talking about. CEOs don't.
I'm hoping that he can tap in. I'm hoping he can tap in. He says, if you are a wise leader, you allow yourself to be overridden from time to time as well. So
get over yourself. Okay, listen. It sounds like.
The Butter Design says responsibility is always on the guy. So we kind of open this up, and we're talking a little bit about family here. I'm gonna need you all to tap in. I'm gonna always on the guy. I'm gonna need you. Well, in my experience, that's always been the case. In my personal experience, I've had situations where it was like, hey, I had a situation once, and we're gonna get back to the topic, but I had a situation in my personal life where a young lady broke up with me. She broke up with me, went out on her own, and then was experiencing financial difficulties. And then called me and said, why did you allow me to break up with you? If you didn't allow me to break up with you, I would not be in this situation that I am financially. I've actually had this happen before.
What does that have to do with anything?
No, all I'm saying is when the brother says,
wait. Do you understand? Whoa. Do you understand? Do you understand that the responsibility was not on you?
Yes, but what the brother is saying is that the responsibility tends to always be placed on the guy, even when it's not your
By who?
responsibility.
By who?
By society and by women.
So you believe that society, if that interaction between you and that individual woman and you as an individual man, she says, I break up with you. And then she goes off and has problems and then comes back to you and says, how dare you allow me to break up with you?
I've
Now
had
I
this
have all these
happen.
problems and you're responsible. You
I'm
said
not responsible.
society,
I'm not responsible.
the
But I'm
court of
saying
public
this is something
opinion,
that happened.
would have joined her in condemning your lack of responsibility.
In some segments of society, yes. And
Now,
I know because I've seen and experienced
what
it.
segment of society? Identify that segment of society.
It was particularly when
Because I
you're dealing.
promise you, there's not a sister
Hold
in
on,
the
let me answer
comments
the
that
question.
agrees with that.
Hold up now. You're gonna ask me a question, I'm gonna answer it. All right. Now listen, I'm letting you eat, but this is my show, okay? I'm letting you cook, but this is my show. So I would say two segments of society. One, higher education. I work in higher ed, I am an academic, and oftentimes, unfortunately, in higher education, there is a very strong, radical feminist sentiment in which the man, no matter what he does or how he does it, he is seen as vehemently antithetical to what the progress of human society. And I'm telling you what I've experienced, and I've been working in higher ed the past 10 years. I've even had professors share with me, hold on now, I've even had professors in my time, colleagues in my time working in higher ed who stated, listen, these are some of the issues that are taking place. People don't like you. You haven't never said or done anything that was unbecoming, but because to them, you're very masculine, they take umbrage with your existence and your place here, your presence in this space. I'm telling you my own experience. Now, this is anecdotal in nature, so I can't say this is the case for everyone, but these are simply things that I've experienced. I've had individuals tell me, I'm uncomfortable with your presence because you're very masculine.
Can I respond?
Please.
Did you go to HR?
Yes, I did.
And did HR side with the woman or you?
They stated that even though the claims I made, and this was the Office of Institutional Equity, even though the claims that I made were factual, they did not rise to the level of a policy violation. And I actually have this in writing. I still have it saved to my desktop.
Well, listen.
So this isn't like I'm pulling something out my ass.
Here's the thing. I can't argue or debate your personal experience. I'm just going to be honest because I respect you. You're my brother. It sounds absurdist to me.
I think it was absurd as well.
And again, I hear these fantastical stories that are
but
outside.
I have mine in writing. Like I can actually document this. I could pull it up and send it to you.
Okay. Then we can come back and discuss it because that sounds absurdist to me. And that you okay, but I mean we're way off. But
we gonna get that
stuff with okay. So men are unjustly held responsible for things that we are not responsible for, and because we are unduly and unjustly held responsible for shit we are not responsible for, we should go ahead and take the initiative of rulership and CEO and head and leader.
Well, so
let me finish the logic. Logic that's been basically laid out here. We should take the leadership role because if we didn't control shit, we would be blamed for things anyway.
Well, so I didn't say control.
Of dictatorial leadership power over the spaces we dwell and the women in our lives, because even if we don't and the women have hardship or fail, we'll be blamed anyway, right?
Yes, that is what, and I would give an actual example with Catch-22. Damn if you don't, and then I'm gonna let Brother Tony Robinson tap in. And I would give an example. Typically, what we hear in the Black community, and this is the rhetoric that's promoted, is women are carrying the burden of the community on their shoulders. They have to do everything. They have to raise these kids on their own, right? And as a result, this means that Black men aren't handling their business. However, on the flip side, if a man says, you know what, I'm going to be in a home, I'm going to be a leader in my household, I'm going to raise my children and teach my son what it means to be a responsible, productive man and citizen in society, he's seen as being patriarchal. So you tend to be damned if you do, or damned if you don't.
I'm sitting here listening to you misdefine what feminism is and what feminists do. And now you're misdefining what patriarchy is. There have been many male and female scholars to define what patriarchy is. And patriarchy has never been defined in any space or any literature that I've ever come across as a man stepping up saying, hey, I'm going to share the burden of the household, or I'm going to take responsibility for my offspring and contribute and assert myself within my family, has never, ever been defined as what patriarchy is. By any feminists, even feminists I have issues with, have never defined patriarchy in that way or asserted their feminist ideology in that way. And I have several deep critiques of feminism. But when we make these frankly absurdist claims about what feminists demand, what feminist complaints are, and feminists.
Well, I'm going off my experience.
When we make those assertions, we hurt and create a space where we can't really reach any sound or functional resolution, because if a person is being absurd, if you really are running into these frankly irrational,
I could give you an example.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
You're just a very unfortunate man. I'm very sorry for you.
And we're gonna open this up to nanology
because you are telling me that you've ran into men who have said, I'm going to step up and be a responsible father, a responsible husband, a responsible member of this household, and a responsible community member, and some woman jumped up and said, that's patriarchy.
Yes. And I'm going to give you another example that I actually experienced. This probably was like,
the examples that until we get names and we can bring
I'm not about to put the person's business out like that. I don't do that.
There's no evidence.
Hold on. So first and foremost, there is evidence.
You're making unsupported claims.
Once again, as I stated, I had a situation where there was a sister, we was kicking it. She told me she was a feminist beforehand. We sit down, and we was at my place. We was drinking some wine, having a intellectually stimulating conversation. I disagree with her about something. She jumps up and says, you know what, I'm leaving. So I said, listen, you've been drinking. I don't think it's a good idea for you to leave. Maybe, hey, if you don't like me right now, you could just sleep on the couch, sleep it off, and leave in the morning. I go to my bedroom. No, I'm leaving. Blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, I can't make you stay. I said, could I at least walk you to your vehicle? Absolutely not. Okay, because you can't hold someone against their will, particularly if they're over the age of 18. That's actually a law in the state of Ohio. It's known as unlawful restraint. The next morning, I get a text message from her. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't have let me leave.
Okay.
This actually happened.
What does that say?
That's crazy.
That is a commentary. Are you saying that would have justified what? I don't understand the point of that story.
The point I'm making is that I was in a situation in which I was damned if I do, damned if I didn't. If I held her against her will, I'm doing something that's nefarious, controlling, and of course illegal.
Yeah, and anyways, this stream is being ran by a bunch of stupid, dumb niggers. Why don't you watch this nigger have sex real quick instead of talking about...
I don't know who the hell that was, but they out of here. Out of here. So we're going to ban this person. I apologize for that. Wow. Brother Shabazz, what say you?
Oh, no, well, I would say I feel like a second ago, things kind of got missed because I don't think a man taking responsibility for his children would be considered patriarchy, but I think a man declaring the ultimate responsibility for his family, right? Declaring ultimate responsibility would be considered patriarchy, where you're placing yourself at, the typical role of, hey, I'm the man, this is my house, this is my family. I believe that's patriarchal. I don't believe it's patriarchal to say I'm going to take care of my kids, but the manner in which you go about that is different. A lot of feminists I know have encountered, they believe in equality, that would be a split 50-50 responsibility. But if I say, hey, I'm a man, I'm responsible for my house, right? That, would you agree, is patriarchal?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I don't understand what you mean by ultimate responsibility. What do you mean by ultimate responsibility as opposed to just taking responsibility?
Because
does that mean, I'm sorry?
Because if say for instance we're 50-50, right? If I enter something, am I low? Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you just fine.
Yeah, if I'm in a relationship and it's 50-50, we both have responsibility. right? But if I say, hey, I'm the man of this house, whatever happens in this house, I am responsible for. So even if the wife makes mistakes, it's still your responsibility too. It's not split.
To me, that's absurd. If my wife made a mistake, I'm not taking responsibility for her mistakes. Why would I do that? And how would
Because it's
she
your
learn and
family.
grow? Allow me to finish. How would she learn and grow as a person if she was able to navigate the world knowing that anything she does wrong, that I'll eventually carry the weight and responsibility for that? That's how would she develop? I wouldn't want to be with a person who wasn't willing to take full responsibility for their mistakes. Not to
No,
say
I
that
think
I
they should
wouldn't
take
aid or help
responsibility.
or work with her, but if my wife goes out and does something wrong, then no, I'm not taking responsibility for it if I'm not responsible for it. Now, I understand this connotation that ultimate responsibility, this head of household, it is rather absurd. It's just made up. We have made that shit up. Family formations and family structures are wherever we make them. I don't believe in the 50-50. I believe in the 100-100. I am a man with skills, capabilities, ambitions, and dreams. And my wife is a woman with skills and ambition. So as we come together, we both have certain gifts, certain responsibilities, certain things we can contribute to the relationship. And we navigate that. What dominates my household is reason and rationality. So if I want to assert my will and my wife does not fully agree with me, it is up to me to make a sound and grounded argument and articulate to her how what I am asserting is what's best for everyone. And because I have what allows me to, what gives me that influence is because my wife and I have been together for over 20 years, and I have a long track record of making sound, rational decisions and putting the interest of my family first. It has nothing to do with me having genitals of a man and the XY chromosome or any divine nature or my masculine energy or my testosterone. If my wife wants to assert something and make an argument for something, then she has just as much ability, competence, and intelligence to assert herself as I do. And when our interests diverge, that's when two adults sit down and come to a rational resolution. It ain't no, well, I veto you. Oh, it's time for me to be CEO. I mean, why do black men have to play these goddamn games within our homes? It's much more shit
so
we
what
need to do.
I'm going to say, I don't think it's a game. I don't think that's something that is germane.
It's make believe.
I don't think it's something that's germane to black men.
But that's what we're talking about. Hey, if you want to talk about white men, I can talk about them all day.
I'll let you finish.
Okay.
All right, then we're going to pass it over. And Sister Empress Love, she says, laugh aloud. I've heard something similar from my old homegirls, laugh aloud. And I would make this argument, and this is something I've even heard from brothers who have had failed marriages, that they would have a history of making sound, rational decisions that were in the best interest of the family. The women would say, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. These are things that happen on a regular basis. Now, what I always tell people, if you're dealing with someone like that, then what you need to do is end the relationship. Right? I mean, that's just what I would do. If I'm dealing with someone and they're engaging in behavior that is disrespectful, they're not someone who's going to be willing to concede to reason and logic, then I just wouldn't be with the person, first and foremost. But I also would agree that I'm not responsible for the decision someone else makes. I was in a relationship once where I told the sister, listen, when you take this job, there's certain things that are going to take place, particularly with them folks. Don't fall for the proverbial banana in the tailpipe. She fell for the banana in the tailpipe. She lost her job, and I said, it's on you to find another one.
Did she blame you?
Actually, she tried to. Yes, she did. She actually tried to. I am not making it. She actually tried to blame me for her losing her job, and I had nothing to do with it. I knew no one at her job. I had never been to her place of employment, and she somehow tried to come back and blame me. And as you can imagine, the relationship didn't last because I was dealing with someone who was illogical.
Yeah, yes. The reason I like to bring up the CEO work situation is because once we go into business, we can take the gender dynamic out, and the gender thing is going to cloud everything. It's going to be, oh, you man, you're trying to tell me this and that. But then when we go to work, everyone they have no issue with it. They understand that this is the supervisor. The supervisor has a manager. The manager has, and they fall right into it. And the reason for it is just for the sake of order. Like I'll give you an example. I talked about me being in the cannabis industry on this show before. right? At a point in our partnership, because it was a partnership, 100% Black owned partnership amongst us, right? At a point in our partnership, I was the COO under the CEO, right?
Chief Operating Officer.
Exactly. For the most part, I ran everything. Now, the CEO at any given time could step in and say, you know what, I don't want to do this. We should go this direction. And I could resist, I could plead my case, but we all agree that he is the CEO. And at given times, if we have a split in what we believe, we're going to go with what he says, right? It doesn't make me any less than him. I'm the one doing everything. I'm the one setting everything up, setting up all the operating, I'm doing everything. It doesn't make me any less. It's just for the sake of order, we have to have someone who has the executive decision so we can know which direction we're going to go in when we run into something like that. I don't see what's wrong with that.
Sister Hanifa, I put the link in the chat. I definitely would love for you to come in, be part of the conversation, bring some divine, feminine, Black African femininity to the conversation. The link is in the chat. So Sister Hanifa asked the question, can there be order without a hierarchy?
I think that's the only way to have true order. And you run your family like a business when we all know that over 90% of all business startups end in failure and bankruptcy. So the business model is not a good one. And again, I hear a lot of these arguments that don't seem to function in the real world. If we're going to discuss patriarchy, we can discuss patriarchy, but no one's identified it.
I'm gonna do a show on it.
I don't see anyone that's really identified any of the real arguments of patriarchy. I also understand the feminist point of view and the feminist ideology and the feminist agenda. I haven't heard that articulated here. It's like you said, there's a lot of anecdotal experiences, but I am very much aware of and was brought up in and taught, indoctrinated myself into the man is the head of the household, the man is the breadwinner, the man is the ultimate say in the home, and all of that rhetoric. And Black people mimicking white men, Black men mimicking white men in that has been very trying to impose and superimpose that dysfunctional structure within the Black family, which was never the nuclear family. We never had nuclear family structures that I'm aware of. We had multi-generational.
We also had nuclear family structures, even back on the continent, before European incursion on the continent. The
nuclear family is a product of Western industrialism. Europeans didn't even have nuclear families didn't even have the nuclear family structure up until the industrial age. In the post-agricultural societies, there were no nuclear. If you had a nuclear family, you wouldn't be able to feed and house yourself because there was no industrial production where you can buy most of the goods and services. But so yeah, we had monogamous relationships, husband and wife. But a nuclear family is not simply a husband and wife and offspring. It is a economic and social political structure. But beyond all that, if we can get back to atheism, I'm sorry about your brother's negative experiences, but I don't think that what was taken away, because even if we have bad experiences, we can harm ourselves doubly if we don't interpret or take away the proper lesson that should be learned from those negative interactions. I
was argued that I took away the proper lessons, and my experience and the experiences of hundreds of men that I've spoken to were varying racial, ethnic backgrounds. Things tend to be extremely dysfunctional when you don't have strong male leadership in the home. But we're going to get back to atheism, because I'm going to actually do a show on patriarchy. Is Black patriarchy a help or hindrance to the Black community? I'm going to set it up for probably next Monday, and we're going to actually do a show on that and revisit, of course, this very topic. But we're going to get back to atheism. We were talking about culture don't cultivate. Then, of course, we were going to jump in with the views regarding Farrakhan.
Okay. A strong Black man in the home.
Farrakhan is not Farrakhan. So some of the religious delusions you were mentioning, how he
was back to me.
Yes, he made the argument, and I saw this myself. So this isn't like hearsay where I'm hearing someone say it, he said this. I saw it for myself on YouTube where he stated, and I quote, that black men are molesting their daughters because the mother is overweight, out of shape, and she's burdensome.
Yeah, you saw it on my feed, right? I posted that.
Okay.
Yeah. He said that, and but I mean, coming from an Islamic, the point of view, their holy prophet had a 6-year-old wife, so it is a.
Wait. What you talking about, Muhammad? Peace be upon him, right?
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Excuse me.
So according to the mythological story, the Prophet Muhammad had a 6-year-old wife.
Yeah, one of his wives.
One of his wives was 6 years old. Could you elaborate on that?
Just that. Well, in that era, because in the Bedouin culture, in order to, keep peace between these many nomadic and various nomadic and stationary tribes and communities, they would intermarry. So the men of stature and men of status within those Bedouin societies would take wives from various families. And so one of the wives that was given unto him was at the time he took her in as one of his wives, she was 6 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. Brother Shabazz.
I thought it was 8. I thought it was 8.
Okay.
It was,
8. I'll give you 2 more years.
And,
doesn't make it any better, but okay. Let's make it 8.
Yeah, it was 8.
I'll double her age. She was 12.
Right.
I don't.
That doesn't make it okay.
No, that changes it actually in old times, but
no, it doesn't really change it in old times. And that's another thing where people were like, "Well, that was back then, and this is now." When we can look at the moral and value systems of ancient times, and it's just like everything slavery. A lot of racists say, "Oh, slavery, well, that was just the way things were back then." No, it was understood that slavery was an immoral act. There were abolitionists. There were people who advocated for the protection and the end of child brides and bride theft and things of that time that are contemporary to those times. So, you try to act like, oh, everybody just thought slavery was cool. The slave masters and the slaves, when there was a strong abolitionist movement, to take a child bride, and even in the ancient times, the followers of Muhammad would try to argue that even though he took a child bride, he didn't consummate until she was 12 or 13. He waited to consummate.
No, I don't think that's true.
And why would they try to argue that if they didn't have a problem, if it was just okay with that time? It's like you say, oh, I married my wife, but Bro Diallo, him and his wife, they didn't consummate their marriage for 5 years. Why would you have to argue that if you didn't have an issue with the age of the bride?
The point is
problematic. Yeah. Go right ahead.
Well, no, the point I was saying, when you say 12, then you're starting to get closer to the age where women were married, because the ancient indicator that they had become a woman was puberty. Right. They hit puberty. They have their cycle. This is something that could happen easily at 13, 14, possibly
Absolutely.
12.
But we also have to look at the fact that if we were talking strictly historical, then yes, we could say, well, that was the age of marriage, and the life expectancy for people was decades shorter than it is now. But we're not just talking about history. We're talking about a religion that is applied to this day, and people use the teachings and edicts of that day. So we can talk about the Roman Empire as from a historical perspective, because the Roman Empire no longer exists. But you can't just talk about the U.S., the founding fathers and the U.S. Constitution, because those laws and those men are still impacting our lives to this day. So you have history, but then you also have contemporary ideologies, contemporary justifications for behaviors. And to this day, the Middle East is plagued by child brides and by incest.
Yes, and I would say that I've met a woman.
So if you can't just say, well, that was back then.
Yes, because I've met women who have shared with me, because we know in Columbus, Ohio, there's a very large, Somalian population. And there was a sister, she was at the gym working out, she looked good. I was trying to get my Mac on, body by Lumumba style, right? And she was like 32 years old. I had a 17-year-old son. I said, how in the age of double hockey sticks did that happen? She said, I was in an arranged marriage when I was 12.
All right. So we can't just simply write it off as, oh, that was back then, because the teachings of that individual and the teachings that allowed for that are still being imposed on billions of people to this day.
I mean, and that's their choice, and that's how they want to run their society. That's
not a choice. There are a lot of people, children who are baptized at or christened at birth, children who are forced. I know in my childhood, I was threatened to be put into foster care when I told my grandmother that I didn't want to go to church anymore. That indoctrination is forced and through violence and intimidation and, like I said, psycho-emotional torture. So we can't even dismiss, oh, hey, if they choose to believe in God, that's their choice. A lot of people try to dismiss that. But the vast majority of people, when they are first introduced through religion, is long before they are old enough to make a
rational decision,
a choice or enter a contract. You can make a contract with God as an adolescent or a pre-adolescent that is to last you your whole life and your afterlife, when you can't even sign a lease on a 1-year lease on an apartment. I wish it was everyone's choice. Because for my children, it is a choice. If they want to go religious and believe in God, it would be their choice.
Brother Shabazz, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Give me a sec. I'll be right back.
Okay. So I would agree with you because, my daughter is 12 and I don't see her anywhere close to being a woman. Right. So I think that's one issue. But I think it's a good point because I can even recall growing up in a Pentecostal church. And, we're talking about Pentecostal church. We're talking about holy rollers. We're talking about Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized. Lord, I'm running, trying to make 199 and a half, won't do. And oftentimes, and I've even spoken to a number of people who grew up coaching.
All right, my bad. I'm back.
Church of God in Christ. And oftentimes we would be bullied and screamed at to believe in these different edicts of the doctrine of course, Pentecostalism. So a lot of this does come from a form of social, emotional abuse and torture. Literally, I can recall times questioning how nonsensical the stories in the Bible were and being disciplined in terms of corporal punishment from saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So a lot of it is being forced. And I would say also when children are growing up in an environment to where they can't choose who they're going to marry, they can't choose that, no, I don't want to engage in sexual activity with this grown-ass man. To me, that is a huge problem.
No, okay. All right. But when I say it's a choice of that society to run the way that it wants to run. And regardless of what, so you can cherry pick and pick on religion because you have an issue with this particular philosophy. However, no matter what, you may not force a particular religious philosophy on your children, but your children are being forced into the rules of this society, period, whether they want to or not. We just got through talking about the founding fathers or the framers and how they set things up. You are forced into this democratic system. You are forced into the rules of this society. There are laws and things that if you break those laws, there will be physical pain and torture, solitary confinement. So you're cherry picking this religion, which is really just another philosophical way to live, right?
No,
you can't have multiple wives in this society.
I'm gonna let you finish, and then you can respond, Brother Kenyatta. Go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying you can't have multiple wives in this society. They'll call that bigamy, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that's being impressed on you in all the society, right? So just because doesn't have the word religion attached to it, doesn't mean you're not being, this society doesn't have rules that it enforces the same way a religion does.
Brother Kenyatta?
I studied intently public policy. You cannot compare laws and public policies and constitutional rights and edicts and mandates and regulation to religion. Because first of all, the source, religious rules come from on high, an unquestionable infallible power where you cannot amend, you cannot add an addendum, and you cannot question, debate, or change those laws versus the laws that govern human beings. Every day, new laws are written, laws are repealed, laws are challenged, and you can walk into a court of law and face your accuser. If you are accused of breaking the law, you have a right to plead your case and face your accuser. Whereas in religious laws, you're not allowed to do any of that. So I am all for debating the appropriate laws and policies and reforming, changing, repealing various laws and apologies, but I'm not going to sit here and debate religious law as if it is on par with man-made laws and man-made governance. I have a lot of issues with governance, a lot of issues with the laws, especially constitutional law. But and local laws and policies and the way they are enforced. But that is a world away from this obscene, absurd, religious, on high, all-knowing, all-righteous laws of religion. Those are two different arenas, and you can't use man-made law to justify or excuse people's ongoing adherence to divine law.
Well, I think the flaw in your logic is that you're applying something different to religion. Religion is nothing but man-made law. That's all of us got together and we said the law is what this religion says. That's separate from, and then in the other case, all of us got together and said the law is what these legislators vote on, and so on, so on, so on. At the end of the day, these are people enforcing laws and making laws. It makes no difference if it's titled religion or not. It's people making laws. Is religion not man-made?
Okay, I'm assuming you are an atheist.
No.
What religion are you?
Isheshe or Ifa.
Okay, and you believe that the gods of your religion are man-made.
I believe. Okay, when we talk about, for my personal, right, for me personally.
Yeah,
no, I'm just saying.
It's easy to talk about us.
We got to be real. No, we got to be very real about this. I can't tell you about Ifa without being a human being to tell you.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying any deity that I tell you about, I learned about it as a human from another human.
Okay.
Now, whether I believe there was a supernatural something behind that, as far as everyone is concerned, because everyone doesn't believe in what I believe in, as in this human experience, these are human ideas that I'm presenting, right? So I have my personal beliefs, but as in this human experience, this is a man-made human thing that we're espousing to other people if they're not believers.
Your gods are man-made human inventions, and the edicts, the doctrine, the rituals that you follow, the shrine and all of that, there is no supernatural or otherworldly component. It is all man-made, and all of the meaning and relevance comes from man and man's imagination. Is that what you're saying?
That's not my belief, but I would be okay with a non-believer if that's your interpretation of it. I would be okay with that.
Well, you just sat here and told me that all these other people's religion is man-made, but this is my point. What I was saying when you were trying to compare constitution or local laws to divine law, and you were very comfortable with saying, "Oh, it's just man-made." People who follow this stuff do not believe it's man-made. I've been assaulted.
I don't either.
I've been physically assaulted by individuals by simply stating, I don't believe this. I think it's made up. There's no evidence to support what you're saying. People believe to the point where they're willing to sacrifice their own lives or take the lives of other people, that these scriptures are divinely inspired word of God, and that God exists and that God is real, and the word of God, the teachings of God, and the prophecies of God are 100% factual, and people navigate and engage the world with that belief system.
Somebody died protecting the Capitol building, right?
See, you're jumping around on me. Let's stick with this for a second. Let's run with this.
Okay.
Let's just stick with this. Now, you're telling me that because I understand that it's man-made.
Yeah, you that's your belief, right?
No, that's not my belief. That is evidence. We have evidence of man making gods, and we have evidence of man creating holy scriptures. We have no evidence of any supernatural or divine power doing anything anywhere at any time. I have evidence that men write the holy books, print the holy books, change the holy books, burn the holy books, and do all kinds of things with the holy books. No, that's not my belief. That is evidentiary fact.
No, it's evidence.
I can even show you the copyright on the Bible.
There's no proof that it's not supernatural. There's not a supernatural.
Do you have evidence of the supernatural?
I have what I believe will be evidence.
No, I didn't ask you. Evidence and belief do not belong in the same arena.
I don't have empirical evidence. No.
Okay, so you have no evidence.
But you don't have proof that it's not, though. That's the thing.
Okay.
So you can't say it's still a belief. You can't prove that you can't. How are you going to disprove the supernatural?
It's
You
not
can't disprove it.
falsifiable. You can't disprove it. Therefore, you cannot make claims based on it.
Right, but you also can't ultimately say that you can't disprove. You can't say that it's you can't tell me for a fact that it's man-made, and you know that for sure. You can't
Yes,
say
I
that.
can. I can absolutely tell you for a fact.
No, but you
it's
can't
man-made.
disprove.
Yes, I
How
can.
can you disprove the supernatural? You
Huh?
just said it's not
I
falsifiable.
didn't say that I can disprove the supernatural, because the supernatural does not exist. It's a figment of imagination. It would be akin to disproving Santa Claus or fairies. But what I said I could prove and provide you evidence is that the scriptures and the holy books and the temples are all man-made. All of the physical material components of religion and belief systems, all are man-made. The
Right, but
languages and the symbols and written forms are all human inventions. In fact, we have people that made up whole new religions within our lifetime, like Scientology. So
This
we
is
have
very true.
evidence that man makes religion. We have no evidence that God makes man, but we
no,
have
but
evidence that man makes gods. I
yes,
can make a God here within the time we have this discussion.
but this is the thing, right? Typically, your argument works because it assumes that I'm trying to tell you I can prove that God, the Bible is inspired by God, but I'm telling you that I believe the Bible. I'm just, for the sake of example, I believe the Bible was God inspired word. We used a man to write it, right? You cannot disprove that. It's not possible.
I don't need to disprove it because I'm not
But you
making any
do if you're
claims.
going to
I
say,
simply reject your statement. I say
yeah,
I
right.
reject what you say.
You reject it on the basis you do not believe. When you see me write a book, you don't believe that God is inspiring me to write this book, but you can't prove that he's not.
I don't need to, though.
Yes, you do. For you to
No, I
say
don't.
that,
What?
for you to say
Wait. That's not
for you to say
how.
that it's anything other than a belief, you would need to prove that it's not.
I'm sorry.
So hold on. Let me let Brother Jabril Africa tap in. And there was another sister Hanifa. If you're still around, I'm still would love for you to tap in, be part of the conversation. Brother Design, you may have some comments. Sister Nesta, Flying Man Disciple, y'all can tap in as well. I just put the link in the chat once again. But Brother Jabril Africa, go right ahead.
Man, I don't even know where to start. Peace to you, brothers. Glad to be on this panel with you, brilliant brothers. What I would say is religion divides us. See how we're having this argument here? I take the position. Let's have this debate after we have our liberation. Let's get free from our enemies, and then have this conversation. I think these things only divide us. I think when we come together, I think what we should be conversing about is how can we organize our people and get liberation. That's what I believe. So yeah,
Very good.
I don't know if you had a question for me.
And I'm quite sure that Kenyatta is going to argue that the belief in religion and spirituality inhibits us from gaining our liberation. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you make that point, because I articulate that a lot as well, but I'm going to let you make that argument.
Right. We can't ignore central elements. You can't ignore your way or put blinders on for revolution. Revolution is ultimately an intellectual endeavor, and the fundamental germ seed of any revolutionary struggle is ideology. People struggle around ideologies. So if your ideology does not confront ideas or belief systems within your community that are counter-revolutionary, that are reactionary, you can't say, oh, we're going to ignore religion until we're free, or we're going to ignore spousal abuse until we're free, we're going to ignore poverty until we're free. No, actually, confronting these things and dealing with these things are the path to freedom. So it's part and parcel of our liberation. It would be akin to the people who colonized and enslaved us to say, well, let's not convert the Africans to Islam until we have them enslaved, or let's not convert the Africans to Christianity until we have them locked on the plantation. They happen simultaneously, all in the same time. So I wish that were the case, that we could hyper focus on revolution, but this is the revolution. This is the necessary, uncomfortable work of revolution. If we don't have the stomach for this discourse, we don't have the stomach for the other bloody, painful parts of revolution.
I don't think we should. I think the trap everybody falls into, and I think somebody I heard say this a while ago was Richard Dawkins, actually. The trap everybody falls into is they put this special thing on religion as if it's separate from every other ideology and idea. It's not. This is just a set of ideas that's been given this priority, but it's just a set of ideas. So you say, hey, let's wait until we get liberation because this is dividing us because we debate. We could debate about anything. I could debate right now about Ohio
Yes.
State being fourth in the FBS, and I could say that it should be Alabama.
Yeah.
Debate anything. So religion is no different. We that's the point I'm making.
The
I
reason
do
I say
disagree
that,
that religion is just another idea.
What's the difference?
Religion, like I said, we talked about the atrocities committed, justified by religion
In the
and
name
by
of
religious
religion, yeah.
institutions. So
We
religion
could
is
talk about the
much more-
Crusades. We could talk about 9/11. We could talk about the witch hunts, the Indian partitions, the 7/7 bombing, manifest destiny, child human sacrifices, honor killings, all due to the name of
Okay,
religion.
but what about all the secular communist states that did the same things? What about that?
Why did they do it?
For political gain, for their political aims or whatever.
Right. So we can talk politics too. Yeah. So I'm
But
willing
what
to
human
debate
beings
politics,
kill
but
each other,
nobody gives a sacred status to politics. So religion is something we can discuss, but it is something unique unto itself. It's not just another beliefs thing. It's not
It's
just
the same
another.
thing. If they can go and kill people on these massive scales, and they clearly denounce religion, and then they're still going out killing all these people, what's the difference?
The
It's
difference
the
is
same
the
outcome.
difference is here's the problem with religion. Religion allows for people who know nothing to believe that they know absolutely everything. If I, as a secular, as an atheistic person, goes out and do anything, I don't have the coverage was in the name of Allah or with God's blessing. I have to explain it based from a materialistic point of view. My motivations, my justifications all start here and end here. Whereas if I am a religious zealot, my justifications are on high. And like you have said yourself several times, there's no way to prove or disprove. There's no way to challenge because God told me. And how can you prove that God didn't tell me? But if I say, listen, I am a communist, and I believe that in order for communism to survive, we must rapidly industrialize this country. And we have to put all of our emphasis and resources towards industrializations, and all citizens must be mobilized to industrialize. And you say, well, what brings you that conclusion? And I could say, well, look at the geopolitical nature, look at the resources, look at our history. But if I say, and you can argue it, you can dispute it, you can dissect it. But if I say, like you agreed, it comes from on high, there's no way to challenge it. God told me to. God divinely inspired me to industrialize this country versus my communist ideology, which was written by Marx, Engels, Trotsky, Lenin, men we know, we have evidence that they existed, and we can suss out their arguments, and we are free to question their logic and arguments. But if you're not coming with reason and logic, there's not even any way to suss it out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in the end of the day, you're looking at disagreement. Like I said, I understand the point you're making, because in the end of the day, right, if I disagree with however you came up with your conclusion, you're going to kill me in the name of communism because I want to do something else. So what's the difference? We got two people who disagree with something, and it's going to end with you using violence to enforce your beliefs.
They weren't
These are
killed
two
in the
different
name of
ideologies.
communism. They weren't killed in the name of communism.
Mm-hmm.
They were
then
killed.
What would it be?
Killing you in the name of communism. Well, again, that's great. I can get into these discussions and debates on politics, but that's not the topic. We're talking about religion, and you're using secular, man-made positions to justify these divine, on high delusions.
Well, no, they're using religion to get to the positions. The positions are religious positions.
Well,
like, even
it's
right
like
now,
you said, I agree with you that it's all man-made. I agree with you, but you saw when I started questioning your own deeply held supernatural beliefs, you weren't so comfortable with just dismissing it as just something men made
No,
up.
well, because I don't have to believe it's man-made, but if we're gonna live together, I have to respect your beliefs. You have different beliefs than me, and
So you
the
were
only
being
thing.
dishonest?
No. I'd say say for instance, I believe in what I believe in, the deities, the supernatural. I can't prove that to you, but me and you have to live together. So I'm not gonna go to you and say that I can prove what I can't prove. So for the public sector, when I go into the public square, I have to be honest and say, look, I can't prove this to you. This is a faith of mine. So as far as this public square is concerned, this is me presenting this to you. I can't prove
And you need
beyond that.
and that has no place in the public square. The deeply held beliefs of your heart need to remain in your heart. As Malcolm X said, leave your religion in the closet, leave it at home. Because anything you bring to me publicly, I want to be able to dissect. I want to be able to trace it to its source. I want to be able to critically think about it. I want to be able to dissect and restructure it. And I want to find the evidentiary material groundings and supports for what you say. But you did say that religion, I have notes here that I've been writing the whole show. You did say that religion is made up and man-made up until the point I start asking you about your personal religion, and then you were not so comfortable with saying it's made up and man-made.
Mm-hmm.
So
listen, it's men that
the
put it
wall we
out.
run into. I am a vegan. I am a socialist. I am a Pan-Africanist. It is all made up by men. Everyone has a right to dissect it, to question it. And if we are not able to articulate how any of these ideas that I'm articulating to you, if I'm not able to articulate how it would serve you and your interest in your community to embrace these things, then you should have every right to reject it. And I was like, can you prove me wrong? You have every right. I will send you anything, whatever you qualify as evidence or supports for these positions. Religion doesn't do that. Religion is a unique mass delusion that is
but
different
religion is
political
debated.
ideologies. That's why it's in a different space. Political ideology, public policy, things that are man-made, scientific analysis, scientific critique are in a different space than theology. Theology has its own unique space. It has its own unique problems, and we need to address it in that space. We can't just say, "Well, everybody believes something." That is basically intellectually dishonest.
Listen. Religion, even religion, it has changed and transformed. We go around the world. There's hundreds of religions, thousands of religions, right? So, and there's Christianity, for example. It takes on many different faces. If what you said was true, that no, you just have to accept it based on God, then why is there a million different sectors or different types of Christianity? Because people are debating these ideas and they're coming up with different ideas, and they're also updating the ideas. There's sacrifices all over the Bible. And then all of a sudden they say Christ is the ultimate sacrifice, and they updated the Bible. So these things can be updated, things can be changed because they are just ideas amongst the men at the end of the day. That's what ultimately, that's what it is. Well, how could a religion change and evolve if it wasn't?
I understand. I'm an atheist. There is no God. All of this shit is made up by men. But the things we make up by as men, as women, the things we invent hold different levels weight in society. They have different levels of impact. They affect people in different ways. So people are out here mutilating their bodies in the name of religion, starving themselves, beating children in the name of religion. So we can't simply say, well, men made it up, so that deals with that. No, we still have to engage with it. And I think we all, as responsible human beings, as the ultimate, who take the ultimate responsibility, as you mentioned earlier, I think the only thing responsible for any human being to do is to confront and challenge and work to dismantle the institutions and delusions of religion. I think that's the only responsible thing any human can do, especially for these Abrahamic apocalyptic religions.
Male chauvinist cults.
Male chauvinist murder cults. Now that humans have the technology to make these absurd prophecies of human extinction by fire and retribution, now that we have the weapons and technology to bring about the end of the earth, it is no time. We have to aggressively confront pernicious ideas. And that's what we do. So even though the USSR said it was communist. It was not a communist regime. It was an absolute dictatorship. It was an authoritarian dictatorship under Stalin. And now we denounce and challenge them wherever they emerge. Nazism, we confront and challenge it. So bad ideas, negative ideas that have caused great suffering amongst humans, we confront, challenge, and try to destroy or expunge them. But Christianity gets free pass. I can wear a cross into work and nobody will say shit. I can wear a Star of David in certain areas. Now, some places you wear not the crescent star. There's some places
crescent moon, yeah,
in the Midwest and South. But by and large, you can be a Muslim. You can be, but so those are dangerous, pernicious ideas that are leading to not just individual or community-wide suffering, but religious delusions are threatening the survivability of humanity.
So let me say this, Sister Kelly, you're going to need to tap in and really be able to unpack what you stated here in the comments. She says, I'm sorry, the Bible is a social and emotional intelligence we have clearly lost. Please tap in and explain what you mean by that. Brother Jabril Africa, what's the word?
No, I'm just listening to these brothers. I'm trying to figure out because brother Diallo, right? Diallo, am I pronouncing your name right,
Yeah.
brother? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, the brother said that these religions will prevent us from gaining our liberation, and to a degree, I do agree with him on that. But I find that if we spend that time just debating, essentially, if we say we have to resolve this issue with religion we have, and then we can go get our liberation, we'll forever be stuck there. There's no question about that. You're not, even with you two brothers being atheists and being brilliant and can hold your argument incredibly well, you're not going to change the mind of the vast majority, if not all of our people. You're not going to do that. So how can we get past that and just deal with organizing the masses of our people? We have had revolutionaries that were Christian. We've had revolutionaries that were Muslim, right? So my frame of thought is, why do you think that will prevent us from gaining our liberation? We've had revolutionaries from both religions. I'm not saying that all Christians or Muslims are those or can be revolutionary. I'm not saying that at all. But I think it's something that we can put to the side while we gain our liberation. That's what I believe. But let me hear your thoughts on that, brother.
I never said that we have to get black people off religion before we can wage revolution. I said that is part of the work of revolution. There are several components to revolution: dismantling the systems and institutions of global white domination, dismantling the infrastructure of capitalism, restoring the Earth's ecosystems, creating just internal structures and hierarchies, or eliminating unjust hierarchies within our own race. There are several things that we must do simultaneously. We can do within our own personal lives to improve our lives, to make ourselves better assets to our people, to make a better positive contribution to our people's just aspirations. So I do not just walk around trying to deconstruct or dismantle religion or what I call devangelize. Encourage my people to abandon the mass delusions of whatever religious delusions they hold to. That is a component of my life. It is a part of how I engage with my people, but that is not exclusively. So it is my suggestion that the work must be done simultaneously. And it is my vision that there will be a day where there is not one black Christian, Muslim, or even Jew on the face of the earth, because there was a time where that was the case. And I don't understand why we think colonizers have the ability to transform us, but we don't have the ability to transform ourselves. People that sit there and say, oh, you're not going to get people to give up religion. Can you imagine that there was some Portuguese slave runner off the coast of African continent who believed in the Pope, in the divinity of the Pope, and he says we're going to convert those people to our belief system, and one of his shipmates were like, you can't, they're not going to give up their gods. Why do we think people have demonstrated the ability to transform us, but we don't have the ability to transform ourselves? And there was a time where we, African people, African systems, African culture, are much older, thousands of years older than Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Yes.
They are when these religions were in their infancy, as Dr. Clark articulated, when these belief systems were in their infancy, our cultures were old and tired.
Right.
Our gods gave birth to these gods. Many of their belief systems they gleaned from our myths and our folklore. So, but I don't have enough faith, and I use that word, pun intended, in my own people's ability to liberate ourselves psychologically, culturally, and physically in terms of our land. Nah, I believe that we can purge these colonizer religions from our culture and our minds, and that's what I work to do. And
Absolutely.
that
At
does
the
not
end of the day,
doing any of the other work of liberation.
At the end of the day, yeah, religion is a aspect of a person's culture. I forget who it was that said religion is simply a deification of one's culture, right? So religion is can be right, a mechanism to espouse morals and structures over which how society is run, right? It can be a very positive thing. Now, if negative people use it, obviously it's going to be negative, right?
Yes.
But it can be a positive thing. Now, in the end of the day, we had religion, all that old time that you're talking about. We had religion at that time. So if we had religion then, what's the difference? Why is it that we can't function without it now? That's the part that I'm trying to understand with the atheism argument.
What in the world?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, he just did that.
Good. Oh, sorry. I actually was supposed to check out. I told my wife we would be wrapping up at 7:30.
Okay. So
can I say one thing? Quote
please.
Dr. Clark before I go. Where again, I think you a lot of times try to diminish the issues and the problems with religion. I'm sorry, brother, I don't know your name. It usually has the name in the corners.
Mufasa.
But here's the thing. You say religion is culture. Dr. John Henry Clark says, whenever you worship a God that came from outside your culture, you become first the spiritual and eventually the physical slaves of that culture. These religions are alien to the African mentality, the African value system, and the African personality. They are alien to us. So we can't just say, well, Christianity is not African. Christianity is Western, and making Jesus black or talking about the African origins of the Bible, I say, yes, you can argue in many ways Judaism, Islam has some roots, came from Africa, but feces comes from food. That don't mean you should consume it. Just because you can trace origins to something good doesn't mean the other side of it's good. So if you really believe that these alien colonizer religions came from our ancestors, then go back to the source. Why are you dealing with the chewed up, digested, and defecated outcome of the origins? And with that, I'm gonna have to go. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I appreciate you adjusting the time so I could participate. I actually have another engagement at 8 that I have to go to. But anytime, brother, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm happy
you have a good night.
Next Monday, we're gonna do the conversation regarding patriarchy in the Black community.
What time?
I'll probably set it up for maybe 7 o'clock. So 7 Eastern, 6 Central.
All right, and I assume that I'm representing the alpha male side of that discussion.
Listen, you can represent any side of this conversation you want.
I would at very least like to have some sisters on deck to discuss.
I try to get sisters to come on all the time, but I put the link in the chat.
They need to come on so we can explain to them what all
the time. Hey, don't be patriarchal and tell these women.
They don't want to get these lessons. These sisters need to show them. Hey, use your ultimate responsibility and authority. I'm learning about. I'm about to go get my wife brushing me off the tape. I'm about to go lay down the law. Thank y'all for the instruction. So I can tell her that I'm head of household with ultimate responsibility, CEO of this house. Right?
As well you should.
Tell her what y'all taught me. I learned a lot today. Got a lot of notes here to go over. All right, bros. Peace.
Yep. Damn. Yeah, I wish he didn't have to go, because what I wanted to say in response to what he said is, if we go back to the source, we're still going to be out of religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. And this is true. And I think that conversation is multi-level, right? It's multivariate. So first and foremost, I think one of the major issues we're looking at here is that when we talk about African liberation, African people restoring themselves to our traditional greatness, we're talking about, number one, being self-determining in all areas of life, not just solve. right? And we do know that, unfortunately, for many of our people who are practicing alien faiths, it inhibits them from engaging in revolutionary action, particularly in terms of how they view themselves as a Black person. Because we know, particularly from a historical, cultural, and theological standpoint, Africanity and Blackness is seen as nefarious and antithetical to salvation. So I think that's
But you can
one thing.
change the theology, though. If you have a Black liberation theology.
Well, once again, part of the issue is many see that as counterintuitive, right? Many people say, this is antithetical because you're trying to change something. The scripture says it's supposed to be to today, for forever, today, and forevermore. The other issue I would argue is to simply move away from that. I tell people, if you were to practice a religious background or faith, I would argue that it should be one that, of course, is rooted in African culture, and that's who we are as a people. But I myself, as an atheist, believe that all of it is nonsensical, and I, of course, do not align myself with any kind of spookism whatsoever. One of the things I would argue is that, unfortunately, what we tend to find for many people, and this is not the case with you, Brother Shabazz, you're an extremely intelligent brother, very articulate, but for many, unfortunately, I think Brother D. Zion talks about how oftentimes people then become almost brainwashed, right? We're talking about almost to the point of like it's a cult to where critical thinking begins to leave, and they simply follow the preambles and ideas of whoever they're following in that particular religious institution. So I tend to see that it does more harm than good, particularly when we talk about religious institutions that lack financial transparency. And so they oftentimes become economic black holes in our community, in which our people spend an inordinate amount of their money and time, but there are no tangible benefits coming from said institutions. So I think from a holistic standpoint, it would be better to divorce ourselves from these type of beliefs.
See, but the thing, I'm going to the same point I've been making all night. It's my same point with religion. People do that in the quote unquote Black conscious movement, right? You'll have these thought leaders, and then you have people who come by. They don't do the same amount of study. They don't do the same amount of research. They don't do that. They just start parroting talking points.
This is very true. I've come across that. Yes, sir. You're absolutely
this is human
right.
nature. This is like humans. Most humans are going to be followers. Go ahead, bro.
And so I agree with you because I've experienced this before. And I'm like, well, where did you get this from? And I knew that he just heard someone else say it without actually interrogating if the statement was true or not. However, and I think the difference is, and Sister Empress Love and Sister Hanifa, you definitely need to tap in when we had that conversation about patriarchy. You said you enjoyed the perspective on Brother Umalara's last series. Very good. And so I think one of the major issues we find is that, unfortunately, because of the religion is tied to this belief in the supernatural and the omnipresent God, that people don't, you're taught you can't question it because it comes from God. I think that's the major issue, is that we can question ideas, and then oftentimes if someone does try to question different religious beliefs, they're considered a heretic. And as a result, this is why we see the proliferation of different doctrines of Christianity. Right? Okay, I had to leave this place because oftentimes it's even unsafe for me to even be in this place. So I have to go and create my own doctrine and concept of Christianity. So I just think
that's an issue of intolerance, right? So we have an intolerance issue where you're not allowing people to have different.
But most Abrahamic faiths teach you to be intolerant.
That's true.
That's part of the belief system, is to be intolerant.
Well,
literally.
Okay. It's a part of it is to be okay. So when you say Christianity, for instance, is to be intolerant, do you mean that them rejecting other ideas?
What do you mean when you say meaning that? This is right and everything else is wrong. That's intolerance. It doesn't believe in pluralism.
But it doesn't mean it. No, they're saying that their way is the only way, but that doesn't mean there's not room for other people, though. Yes,
it does mean that.
I don't say that, because by that logic, Christians would be trying to kill off.
I'm sorry?
By that logic, they would be trying to get rid of the rest of us.
They have.
That was the case.
They have been.
No, they're spreading.
They have.
I don't think they have to. I don't think it's to the point where they have to get rid of the rest of it. I don't think it's to that point.
They have.
Now, I don't like that what they say about other people and the ideas and their religion. Like both of us would be considered evil or whatever by their standards. Wow. I don't agree with that part. But ultimately, like when Christ is saying render unto Caesar what is Caesar, he's not saying go destroy Caesar.
Once again, you're taking a quote. I'm talking about, you stated that they're trying, Christians, and based on that belief system, that logic, are trying to destroy people who are non-Christian. And I'm telling you that for thousands of years, That's what they've been doing, trying to destroy people who don't believe what they believe in. And you know that is a historical fact.
Yeah, but this is just things that humans been doing. Like we could go before Christianity, because even going back to the point before Christianity, the Bible, it could be repurposed. You know what I mean? There's room in there for me to interpret it for my own purposes and my aims. It can be repurposed, right? So it really comes down to what are people doing with the information, right? If Europeans found Islam, you think they'd be doing anything different?
No.
I mean, Islam's a bad example, but if they found something peaceful,
well, I mean, I don't.
I don't think so. I think they'd be doing the same thing.
I think them folks to be them folks, just like I expect a dog to be a dog. But I think overall, one of the major issues, of course, is that these faiths are vehemently anti-Black, anti-African. Then second, that they promote, of course, blind obedience, right? So when we talk about, and what a design, I need you to tap in. Empress Love, I need you to tap in. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time because we're going to shut it down in about maybe 20, 30 minutes. So I definitely want you all to come in and share your perspective. But, oh, golly, I lost my frame of thought. But I think one of the major issues when we talk about this is this concept of blind obedience. When we look at the Torah, when we look at the Bible, when we look at the Quran, the origin story starts off with, guess what? Hey, everything is all good. You became knowledgeable, and now that's your ass. Right? I mean, blind obedience. And we see this irrespective of what form of or branch of Abrahamic faith that individuals are practicing. We find blind obedience. And when we go to Eastern faiths, child sex brides, child prostitution, these things are extremely problematic, right? They're morally reprehensible to me, and they're under the guise of religion.
Okay, but what do you call what the Nazis were doing? They'll
follow I would call what the Nazis were doing white supremacy on steroids.
Right, but the point I'm making is, regardless, like, you guys are just cherry picking religion. This is just what human beings do. Like, for instance, you know how many people in the Black conscious thing, they hate religion or whatever, and they'll just parrot what people say, because in the end of the day, everybody doesn't have the wherewithal to handle these large ideas. So people are going to just follow what they're told. This happens, man. I just, even if you take religion out, ultimately people are going to listen to what you say and do what you say, and they're going to blindly follow. They're not going to grasp every concept that you put out. They don't have the ability.
Could you give me an example of people blindly following in the Black conscious movement in which God was not, that there wasn't a religious belief that was a part of that?
Nature Boy.
Who was Nature Boy? I've never heard of him.
Nature Boy is the dude that was taking people out in South America and different places. They were living naked. They were believing in all this. The Black woman is God and all this nonsense.
But there was a belief in God.
Yeah, but that he doesn't really even believe.
I say, give me one in which there wasn't a belief in God, to where there was no religious or spiritual or deity
in a Black
aspect.
context.
Yes, in the Black liberation.
It's tough. Black people always dealing with God. That's why I gave you the Nazis before and Stalin earlier.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, you mentioned in the Black conscious movement. So if
my point is that
blind obedience in the Black conscious movement, without there being a belief somehow tied in with God, then I'm saying, hey, you got me.
I guess it would be difficult for me to give a specific individual. Because there's people who parrot Dr. Umar and some of the things he says, but a specific individual where something happened.
Blind obedience. Those are two, parroting and blind obedience.
They're following his ideology blindly because they don't understand all the concepts behind what he's saying. Right? That people, like, for instance, or Tariq Nasheed, these cult of personalities. There's nothing really religious about his Tariq Nasheed's presentation. But people are following his ideas because they're following him ultimately. It's blind. I mean, they're not looking for ultimate proof.
Intellectually lazy. So you're saying that most of the people who are doing this are intellectually lazy.
But I'm saying most people, no matter what they're doing. Yeah, I'm saying no matter what we're doing, that's what humans do. They're doing it in China, they're doing it everywhere. So ultimately, you could say, all right, look, we're going to set up this different type of system where everything's evidence-based. You're going to get this and this and that, and people are still going to follow you just because they like you and you sound good. You know what I mean? So ultimately, it's just going to come down to what ideas people put out there. Huh?
popularity contest in high school, student body president.
That's it. That's what it comes down. I don't. So what? I guess we already been over this because my thing is, I'm like, what? Why is the ideology of you believe in like black liberation, for instance? That takes faith. This is an idea of something we think may happen. We don't have any proof it's going to happen. This is something you have to believe in, right? That's that ideology.
There is proof. There's proof. However, if I could, what we tend to find is that whenever there has been real or even perceived African or black progress, it's been followed by periods of racial retrenchment. But there is proof. We have evidence starting, of course, with the Haitian Revolution that through armed struggle, black people could gain their freedom as a free, proud, and productive people in the world.
I mean, that we could go in a tangent with that because I mean, you can't be free when they come right back and start taxing you.
Well, and that's why I said whenever there's been real or perceived progress, it's been followed by what? Retrenchment. We all are familiar with what? Star Wars, right? The Empire Strikes Back.
Right. The Empire Strikes Back, yeah, but the point is that you can't say proof. There's no proof that we can liberate ourselves. There's no proof of that. There's evidence maybe, but you can't come with conclusive proof for something that's going to happen in the future. I can only prove something that's in the past. So we can't prove that we're going to liberate ourselves. That's something you have to have faith in. You can present evidence that it's possible, but you can't prove it, right? Okay. You have to have faith that this can happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I feel like what's the difference between that and me putting some religion together?
Well, because once again, like I said, as we said it before, once you put the religion in, the values and the beliefs are supposed to be unquestioned. Right, this is infallible once you say that, hey, it comes from God.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue. Right, you could question, hey, is this going to work? Is this strategy for liberation going to work? But when you bring religion in, it's not supposed to be questioned. When it's coming from God, it's not supposed to be questioned. It's infallible. It's omnipresent. It's everlasting, and it doesn't change. These are the values and beliefs.
Certain things are infallible, but most things are open to interpretation. It's open to interpretation, though. So the Bible is open to interpretation, so we could both interpret it different ways. So it opens up a lane for me to, without rejecting God, come up with a different strategy.
Right, and that in itself is a problem because then you could pull any type of rabbit out you know what and say, hey, God inspired this, and people will go along with it. So I mean, either way, it's a problem.
But when you come up with your ideas on how we're going to achieve black liberation, that's you pulling a different rabbit out your hat too.
Yeah, but the difference is when you have the religious background with God, you don't have to provide proof. You don't have to provide any evidence or tangible strategy to say, hey, this is why if we take this left flank and then we go 2 clicks east and then beat them and then get the higher ground, XYZ will happen. You don't have to do that when you have the religious and God belief in there. You don't have to do that.
I mean, there's no religious situation where maybe some people will believe, but like we said, everybody doesn't need all that, right? They can believe for their different reason, but you still have to provide some type of strategy. You know what I mean? Even the Crusades had to have strategy.
Well, the overarching strategy and belief was that we have to save the Holy Land from the infidels.
Right.
I mean, it's just what it is, right? So, But Africa, I'm gonna let you tap in. I think then we're gonna shut it down because I'm not getting. We got a lot of comments from brothers and sisters in the comments, but they're not tapping in today. And I'm gonna see what this issue is. Why I don't have the people's names up here, and I don't know why that is the case. So I'm definitely gonna look at why that is the case. Yeah, that's strange to me. But go ahead, brother Africa.
Yeah, I don't have much rebuttal to what you brothers have been saying. A lot to think about because my frame of thought has always been African people are really religious, like really religious.
And it's to a detriment. It's to a detriment. Actually, we actually see
I agree
to our people socially, economically, educationally than anything.
I agree.
We actually have tangible examples of this doing more harm.
I agree. It holds us back in many ways. I do agree with that. I mean, even if you look at culturally, if you take a look at, taking on Christianity or Islam, oftentimes you're taking on the culture of Europeans and Arabs. I can speak for my people in Somalia. I'm a Somali, and essentially our people take on a lot of the aspects we claim to be Islam is Arab culture. And that's one of the things I don't agree with at all.
Right, and this is what
We
Dr. Jacob Carruthers talks about when he talks about what? Taking on different alien religions, you're actually practicing cultural nationalism, institutionalized cultural nationalism, that in order to become closer to the divine, closer to God, gain a higher sense of spirituality, right? You have to do what? Extricate yourself from your own history, heritage, and culture, which creates a situation of what? Self-hatred. This is why we got black people running around all the time talking about I'm a Moor, I'm Jewish, I'm this, I'm that, I'm out of the above with the big body beings riding on doves, but I'm not African.
Yeah, it's
That's
crazy.
in part one of the reasons why.
It's menticide is what it is at the end of the day. But
And hold on real quick,
yeah.
and Brother Flying Man Disciple says, like you do you think people didn't understand murder was wrong before Moses went up on the mountain? And I can think a good example to speak to that is the Code of Hammurabi is the oldest criminal justice text in the world. And it predates the story of Moses on a mountain receiving the 10 Commandments. So the answer is yes, we do know that people knew that murder was wrong before the story of Moses on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments from on high from, of course, God.
But that's like saying, okay, why should we have murder laws on the books, right? Yeah, we know it's wrong, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't write it in the laws.
Got you. Sister Empress, I understand you're shy, sister, but that's why you don't have to cam up. You don't have to cam up to be part of the conversation. I'm challenging you as a strong, beautiful, powerful sister that you are to tap in and be part of the conversation, as you know. And Sister Love Ash says, Sister Empress, I will hop on if you do. Right? So listen, there's a challenge. We need some divine feminine energy in the house. Let's make it happen. And we could go on for about another 30 minutes. Definitely want to make that happen. Sister Love Ash says, I'm shy and I was on yesterday. We need the sisters to tap in so that we're not engaging in what? Patriarchy, right? Scary patriarchy. So, and then of course, since you tap in, we're going to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to patriarchy, because I know that I've met a lot of sisters who are extremely powerful, very intelligent, who have shared with me, I want to be in a relationship and have a husband in which he is leading and I'm not having to do that. Right? And so that's a question we can ask as well, but only if the sisters tap in. Sister Kelly, you are welcome to tap in as well. If Sister Hanifa is still on, want you to tap in as well. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. Yeah, I'm going to give you all that Britney Spears treatment. Hit me, baby, one more time, right? I told you I'm corny, so I be saying that when I'm at the gym, and I'm like, hey, I got one more set. Give me that Britney Spears.
I do want to answer a question Sister Empress Love asked, where she asked, what's Dr. Umar's ideology? Dr. Umar is actually a Pan-African nationalist. He has the same ideology as his brother Lumumba and myself.
So it isn't his ideology. He is adherent of an ideology that has existed for hundreds of years, and it's the oldest Black political ideology in the world.
Which to me is actually
well, let's let Kelly get it. I think that's Kelly from the Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to come on and tell the other women it's okay, you can do it.
Absolutely.
There we go.
You know, we believe in duality, male and female. Without both male and female, we have chaos in the universe. That's what our Kemetic ancestors taught us when they were.
Is that a religious belief or a spiritual belief? Duality.
Cultural belief.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, and I have another question. What came first, patriarchy or religion?
I'm sorry?
Patriarchy or religion? What came first?
You know, I would dare say patriarchy. And the reason why I would argue that is, and this isn't an exact science. I haven't actually interrogated this to give you an exact answer. But I would dare say patriarchy. I think it's rooted in nature. I think our bodies are made for different things biologically. And you tend to only find 2 mammals throughout the world in which the man isn't the leader of the group. And that is hyenas and orcas.
Also, sperm whales. I'm a big sperm whale fan, so.
Oh, okay. Shut the front door.
You won't find them in there. And so I do think it's fair to say that religion is man-made. Spirituality isn't. I think there's a big difference between having a spirituality and then following a religion.
I disagree.
Man-made religion. And so with you, Alpha patriarchal males, it's probably not a bad thing if a female follows a religion, because at that point it says that she's willing to follow you. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and I'm gonna say this one: that spirituality is man-made because the definition of spirituality differs based on where you are in the world and in what culture you are in. So that would be one example. The second issue is, once again, when we talk about a lot of people who are religious are extremely irrational, irrespective of what the religion states. If someone's irrational, they're illogical, the relationship is going to be problematic. Sister Love Ash, what say you?
Hi, everyone. I don't know what the question was. Sorry.
No, just tap in and give us your thoughts on the conversation we've been having, and you can just give your opinion in any way that you want.
So I wanted to speak to Black atheism.
Yes, ma'am.
But as far as its damaging effects to the Black community and how we blindly support, spend our time, give tithes, et cetera, to the Black church, and how in turn we are met with what's the word I'm looking for?
Animosity, animus, repudiation.
Yeah, or like greed and like savagery. Like, it's so many different adjectives, and I won't necessarily say that I am for like Black people being atheists, but I definitely understand this perspective.
Got you. And let me ask you this. So what are your thoughts on, I hope you tap in for the conversation we're going to have next Monday, but what are your thoughts on patriarchy in the Black community?
Like whether or not it's bad or good?
Yes.
I think that, okay, well, let me start with this. I think that Black women in particular play a part in patriarchy without actually realizing that they do. So I wanted to start with that.
How so?
But I also think that Black men define patriarchy in a different lens. And oftentimes it gets misconstrued as like, oh, you want to be just like the white man. And I personally feel like when that is said, I feel as though that individual isn't around enough Black men to make that comment.
And because I grew up in a patriarchal household. My parents are still married to this day, 45 years. And
mine as well. They've been together for 30 years.
Okay. Shout out to the city.
Right. Okay, Black families.
This is what we do, right? and I say that to say, yes, my dad was the leader. And so in my view, I see patriarchy as someone who provides and protects, right? And the protection isn't just the physical, I'm going to go out there, beat my chest and act like I'm the big bad wolf. Some of that protection is social, emotional. Some of that patriarchal leadership. And we know studies have shown that children tend to have less disciplinary issues. They tend to have high forms of self-esteem when they have strong fathers in the home.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know why somebody would be against that. And like I said, and this is why I tell people I'm patriarchal, and you all can push back if you want. And I hope some of you all can come on camera. Come on now, I'm the only one out here showing up and showing out. Come on now, show me some love, right?
Nah, my background look crazy right now.
But the issue that I tend to find with men, and I've talked to men of varying racial, ethnic backgrounds, that, okay, we can sit up here and we can say it's 50-50 or 100-100, as Brother Kenyatta said, but the minute something goes wrong, they're looking at you to fix it. But you're the man. Even if the person's a devout feminist, I've experienced this. I can make my own decisions. I'm my own person, my own woman. I got my own place. I make my own money. And the minute something goes wrong, well, you're the man. What are you going to do? So as I have the Kobe Bryant philosophy. If I'm going to be blamed for losing the game, I'm taking the final shot.
And that is that last sentence that you just illustrated is exactly why I say that Black women play a part. They play a role in patriarchy, the very thing that a lot of us are fighting against. We play a role within it and don't even realize it.
Yeah,
I actually have
because part of patriarchy is protection. Don't say you don't want to be under my leadership. For example, when people say, oh, that's just men trying to control women, I disagree. Mama mentality, but a design, absolutely, right? I'm the youngest of my family. I'm the baby in my family, and I'm my parents' favorite, right? Literally, I'm my parents'
honesty.
right? For real. And I got reasons behind it, but we don't got to get into that. But when we would go to the park, my mom and dad would tell my older sister and older brother, when you all go to the park, y'all better make sure nothing happens to him. When we would get around the corner, and before we climb that hill to get to the park, my sister would say, she's the oldest, hey, when we get up here, shut your effing mouth. Don't be talking trash to nobody. And don't be starting stuff with people, because if something happens, we got to fight them. Right? And so I was under my sister and brother's leadership because they were the ones responsible for protecting me. That's how it works. Right? When the president is being protected by the Secret Service, they tell him what to do and where to go. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to say I don't think that it's fair to put the label of patriarchy on what Black men are aspiring. They're aspiring to be leaders, and we haven't had that. I don't think that we've, at least for us Americans, we haven't had the leadership of African males since when? We never have.
Well,
and go ahead.
There was a time.
In
It depends on
America,
what perspective. Is she saying like for the whole society, or are you saying in the house? Because we've had it in the house, but not for society.
Up until the 1960s. Up until the 1960s, we had it in the home. And then Black society, we had it all the way, we can argue from Reconstruction all the way up until what? The 1960s.
overarching in society, I suppose, but also in society, I guess. I want to say the Empress was right on her original point, and that's what triggered my thought on comparing Black males aspiring to be leaders to patriarchy, because patriarchy for me is kind of a yucky word. It's mixed with feminism, and I can't ascribe that label to Black males. I just can't. Not patriarchal.
I mean, I have
at least in its pejorative meaning.
Right. I have Bell Hooks' book, Feminism is for Everybody. I actually read it a while ago. And
I think she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So what she was.
Yeah, it was. It
like a lot of ideas. I'm like, sister, you are brilliant. You are a great writer. You are intellect. You are an academic. But this is the dumbest ish I've read since I picked up the Bible. But go right ahead.
But I guess the point I was just making was that she agrees. Like she talks about how women uphold patriarchy as well. It's not just men. So she puts it on both. So even she would agree.
But like I said, the thing is, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because women tend to put patriarchy on the shelf, and they only want to use it when it's beneficial to them. Hey, I need protection, be patriarchal. I need your wealth and resources, be patriarchal. But I don't want to follow your leadership. I don't want to, bend to your logic or your reason. So what we tend to find with women, not just Black women, but women in general, particularly modern women, is they will use patriarchy when it's beneficial to them, but in the other time it's problematic. This is what we tend to find, because I would argue that most people in society, particularly modern women, are pseudo-feminists. They only use feminism when it's beneficial to them. Like I said, when I was kicking it with that super feminist sister, which I shouldn't have been doing that in the first place.
I don't like feminism.
Right, but she was a baddie, right? And then, like I said, we have a simple disagreement, no arguing or anything. She's drinking wine. I say, hey, you can't just, hey, I'm leaving. I'm gonna do whatever I want. Hey, you right. I'm not gonna keep you against your will. And then guess what ended up taking place? When I woke up in the morning, I had a text message. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't allow me to leave. Absolutely ridiculous. So these are the type of things that tend to take place. You know what I mean? So like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're being a leader, you're being patriarchal. If you let a woman have the first say, you're being condescending and patronizing. So it's almost in a situation where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But as I stated before, in my household, if anything goes wrong, I'm the one that's going to be blamed. So I'm the one that's going to be making the decisions. We're going to talk about it. You're going to be chair as counsel, but it comes down to me. If anything's happening in my home and I don't know about it, that's seen as a failure in leadership on my part.
Is there another word we can call it outside of patriarchy and patriarchal? It's just,
Well, I mean, actually, I don't see patriarchal as a nasty word. I see it as a positive. I don't see it as something that's pejorative. I mean, I grew up in a patriarchal household, and this is why I was able to be disciplined. This is why I did well in school. This is why I wasn't a victim of abuse. We know most abusers, who are people who have to physically and sexually abuse children, are more likely to engage in trying to abuse a child when they don't have a father in the home. And I would say this, and this is a shout out to my mother, but there was for 1 week, my dad was gone on a business conference. There was no structure in the household. I think I was 11, my brother was 15, my sister was 17 or 18. Right? And so there's a reason why when we look at even the story of one Malcolm X, also known as El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, that when his father died, he said his mother couldn't discipline them. She couldn't corral them. She didn't have the energy. Why? Because that's not what her divine feminine nature was meant to do. Right? And we know that 80% of Black children grow up in female-headed households. And we look at the results of these children that are growing up in these households, they are behind everyone else, every other racial ethnic group in this country, when it comes to behaviorally, when it comes to academically, educationally, when it comes to financially. Now, there are some outliers there, but if we look at the whole, it's not beneficial. It's not benefiting us to be against male-led households. It isn't. So, I mean, I don't know why I would never put myself in a position in which I'm not in a position of leadership in my own household. That's just absolutely ridiculous. I would never maneuver myself that way. Next thing you know, I'll be talking about, hey, I gotta get off this broadcast, because matter of fact, if I did that, next thing you know, my son will be on the broadcast talking about he got to end the show because he got to go to work because I'm hungry. You know what I mean? We see this type of stuff where the kids are running the household. Wouldn't happen here. Because I know that as a parent, as an adult, in your home, in your family, there are times when you're going to have to make command decisions. But there are going to be times when you're going to have to tell your child, you're not doing X because I have your best interests at heart and you don't know any better. Now, do you want your children to think for themselves and so on and so forth? Absolutely. But there are times in life where individuals are going to have to make a command decision. Irrespective of you using logic, reason, that's just what you're going to have to do at times. It's not always going to be a partly sunny spring day.
Black male authority, African male authority. I like that one a little bit better.
I mean, it's just the reality. I've never met a woman in my life, right? And I've been around for a little while, who at some point doesn't say, okay, you the man, so what you gonna do? And I remember I was at a Juneteenth celebration. I think I told Brother Jabril Africa about this. And there wasn't any brothers stepping up willing to engage in leadership activities. And some of the sisters said to me, this is the problem we have in our community. We don't have enough men raising up and wanting to be leaders. Part of it is because, once again, the pseudo-feminist ideology that argues that men being leaders is something that is antithetical to Black empowerment. Yeah. Well, what say you, Sister Love Ash?
What was the original question? If you can remember, for Monday.
Oh, so the question for next Monday would be: is Black patriarchy, does it help or hinder the Black community?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Okay. This is more of like just the accountability space. I think like Black women, we just we contradict ourselves a lot when it comes to topics of masculinity, femininity, patriarchy, feminism. We tend to contradict ourselves a lot.
Yeah, I know, and I know the sister Crimson Cure, we know that she has an Islamic background, she's Muslim, but she talks about oftentimes this whole concept of protect Black women. I'm gonna give a very colorful story about protecting Black women that I experienced when I was in my doctoral program at Ohio State. But she argues that oftentimes this concept of protecting Black women, a lot of Black women, modern women, simply want their man to be a dog on a leash, where she says, see person, go get person. They don't ask any questions whatsoever. So I would give an example. This is probably back in 2008, where I was dating this sister, very attractive, right? You know how I do. And we was at Starbucks. And so I'm like, I got to get this coffee cake, so on and so forth. And I'm in line, and she comes up to me and says, man, this guy just called me a bitch. So I'm like, well, who? Why? So I go to the guy and say, hey, what's going on? And he's like, yeah, well, I just asked her name and she said, fuck you, get the fuck away from me. Started cursing me out. So I said, okay, appreciate it. So I went to her and say, hey, why didn't you tell me that you was the one being rude to him when he just asked you what your name was? And so, of course, oh, you won't take up for me. I said, no, I'm not about to be sitting up here fighting people when you're going around causing problems. Right. The second issue, I was working at a COVID quarantine site during COVID. This is 2020. There was a sister there who had told me that she was in a situation where she believed the man a brother had sexually assaulted her. Now, she was in a relationship with a white guy. And I said, well, what happened, if you don't mind sharing? And she said, basically, she was court. This guy was courting her. He was basically asking her every day, hey, when can we, smash, so on and so forth. She initially said, okay, fine. They had sex. She regretted it, I presume, because it was bad. Then she said, okay, he raped me. So I said, well, one, that's not sexual assault. But she said, well, can you go up to the guy and just punch him in the face for me? I said, hold up. First off, where's your white boyfriend at to handle that? I said, secondly, what if I go up and punch this guy in the face? I said, what if he doesn't want to get punched in the face and he pulls out a gun? I said, what if I punch him and he falls and hits his head and then he dies? I said, are you going to pay for me to have a lawyer? You going to post my bond? If I can't get out of jail, are you going to show up to jail and flash me, show me your breast during the visiting hour? Right? I said, these are real questions I need to ask. So some of what we find is, and this sister was in law school, just nonsensical views about how the world operates.
It's crazy that you had to do all that mathematics. To me, you got a white boyfriend, you're a traitor. Go over there. If you go over there, stay over there. So you're really nice.
So, it's like, we kind of see these type of situations. And unfortunately, a lot of brothers who grow up being simps and beta males because they're being raised by their mothers, right? They think, hey, okay, being a good man, just do whatever she wants. She said, did X, Y, Z. And we saw this. There was a situation in Detroit where the guy broke up with the woman. The ex-girlfriend is mad about the man breaking up with her. She calls her brothers to go beat the guy up. But, this guy said, I'm not about to let somebody come to my house and beat me up. So he ends up shooting the guys and killing her brothers. And, of course, it was lawful self-defense. These type of things happen every day.
It seems like that's taught behavior, because I don't think it's intrinsic to a Black woman to expect her man to stand up and fight and defend. Like I think that has to be a certain subset of Black women that think like that. And it's been taught to them, they've seen it. And it's a power that white women have had over their men for so long that these might be the type of Black women that are emulating or would like to have that same control and power over a Black man. I don't think it's...
What type of control and power are you referring to?
Well, when you think back, you don't have to think back. I can point to us. There was a situation where she wasn't old enough to buy cigarettes, but she was an adult. And she went into the gas station and there was a Latino man in there. And he kind of pegged her as being too young to buy cigarettes. What ended up happening is she went to the car and told her boyfriend, he said something sexual to her or something. He went in and killed the man. Okay. The woman didn't do any time, nothing at all, but the man got a life sentence.
Right. Dumb as a bag of rocks. Dumb as a bag of rocks, it sounds like to me.
Yes, it was. But okay, so that type of control over the thinking of a man, we're not really raised up to manipulate early from the crib in that way.
Well, I would disagree. We know 80% of Black households are being led by women, and so we are actually seeing that these type of things are taking place at a higher rate, at an exponentially higher rate than 60 years ago.
But that would mean that Black women raising, going by what you said, that would mean that the Black women that are raising up these children are innately manipulative, and they're teaching that. And I don't think that's true. I think that society, because it's been allowed that white women can do that, and that's the predominant culture in the United States, that type of behavior is not intrinsic to us as Black women. That's a taught behavior. It's learned, it's picked up through observance, and I don't think it's necessarily Black moms teaching their children that type of manipulation.
Well, it's going on now. It's going on now, and all you got to do is go to.
I agree with you.
Hold on. All you have to do is look up some. Matter of fact, if you go to the sister's channel, the Crimson Cure, she does videos on this every day. Pink Book Lessons is another sister. She does videos on these type of things every single day, where this is going on in the Black community, where mothers are teaching this behavior to their sons. The second issue is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the sitcom that was on the air about 20 years ago, the Steve Harvey Show, where he played the retired funk legend who became a music teacher. The character that played Romeo Santana, he was actually shot and killed due to the fact that a 15-year-old girl hit on him. He said, "I'm not interested in you. You are way too young." He turned her down. She went and told her boyfriend and his homies, hey, he made some sexually inappropriate comments to me. And what did they do? They shot him while he was sitting in the car with his friend. This has been going on for decades now.
I'm not negating that at all. But you can't negate the fact that this has been learned behavior from the culture that we're surrounded in.
I would disagree with that. I think that this is being done intentionally. It has nothing to do with white folks. I'm not going to use the cop out that, oh, we don't know what we're doing, it's not our fault, we're just emulating our professors. Because the one thing that we do know is that there are two Black institutions that are not controlled by white people: the church and the household. Now, Sister Love says that's not intrinsic African female behavior, maybe not from an ideological standpoint. This is why I said modern women, but this is behavior that we're seeing more and more here in the Western world, where women have this sense of entitlement to where, hey, if I say jump, you say how high. If I say seek 'em boy, you go after that person that like you're a Doberman picture. That's over and over and over again.
I'm sorry. I think that I will argue until my face turns blue. That is taught behavior. It's in the West. So that right there tells you that this is taught behavior. And maybe you can say that we can't blame the professors, and some of us are that stupid. Okay, some of us are that dumb. It has nothing to do with white people. It has to do with the fact that some of us are that stupid. Or a combination of both. And I've seen a rise in that behavior that kind of correlates with the rise of feminism. And so that's where I say that's not intrinsic to Black women. African women, we tend to be very, at least from my experience, genuine. And so
let me stop you right there. Black women are not a monolithic group, and we cannot essentialize Black women's behavior, just like we can't essentialize the behavior of any racial, ethnic, gender group of people. We just can't do that.
So we won't say that it's racial; it's cultural, and it's picked up. I don't think
white women have that much power over their men.
No, absolutely not. White households are extremely patriarchal.
So, for decades and hundreds of years, when a white woman says he raped me, hordes of white men go out and lynch a Black man.
Right, but
it wasn't a Black man, but not a white man.
But it wasn't due to the fact that the white woman was able to manipulate the man and have a power over him. It was because the white men were wanting to do what? Reinforce white supremacy, and they had the law backing them. They were acting like vigilantes, not just because they wanted to protect the so-called sacred femininity of the white woman, the white rose, but also because it was being undergirded and supported by what? The nation state, the government.
That does not negate that it's not taught behavior.
Right, but I'm saying, but they weren't being controlled and manipulated by their women. For example, there are numerous studies, there's a litany of scholarly literature and research on how white women are treated very bad in white supremacist households and communities. So this whole idea, if they got control of their man, is not something that's supported by scholarship.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm not saying that they have this control and power over their men, but don't underestimate the manipulation of subtle femininity. And because that it's happened like that for so long, that black men, it's been open season on black men, in my opinion, that it's not insane that a black woman would expect her man to go out and defend her in any way possible, like when it comes to violence, so to speak, because then that would go back to patriarchy.
Sister Love Ash, what say you?
I think that black women need to take accountability for putting our men in situations that we either A, aren't going to leave, or B, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Because I always want to be aware of what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that. Just situations that A, we're not gonna leave, and if so we need protection in any situation. Just using the example that you were giving, the examples that you gave, we have to also think of the bigger picture. If I ask this man to do X, Y, Z, what are the consequences of those actions?
Right. And the best form of protection is preventing problems from taking place, which is like
exactly.
which is like how my sister told me back in 1988, when we get up here to this park, shut the fuck up. That's what she would tell me every time. Shut the fuck up. That's the number one way I'm gonna protect you, is how keeping your ass from getting out of pocket.
And you win more without bloodshed in all actuality. So that's just my opinion. And I've seen, just from anecdotal experiences, I've seen where, like, okay, it's a domestic violence situation. You confine in this black man. You don't have any like romantic relationship with this black man. You tell them about it, and then they go do something, and then you're back with that person the next day.
That happens a lot. It happens a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. So you just put this man in a situation that he had no business being in.
Right.
All under the guise of protect black women. And I'm not saying that we don't need protection.
Right.
By any means.
But that protection comes in numerous forms, and it's not just physical.
Right.
I don't think you can add domestic violence
as well. Huh?
I don't think domestic violence is necessarily you can say, well, she told him that he hit her or whatever, and then she went back to him the next day. That's not a race thing. That's domestic violence, and it doesn't matter what race the woman is. That the rate in which a woman returns to her abuser is really high. So that's not just in black women. And I'm not excusing black women in the things that I'm saying. What I've seen, some of us are not that sophisticated. That's it. That's what I'm saying. And I understand, Empress, that you're trying to come from a place of accountability. And I agree with that, because that accountability that you speak of, I try to have. But when I'm looking over here and here and here and here, I'm like, oh, these situations aren't good. And I'm seeing some of the behavior is learned.
Sister Love, what say you?
I will say that it is a race thing. I'm gonna make it a race thing. Okay. I will also say that, and I don't know the statistic, and it's probably not. It would behoove me not to say it, but like statistically speaking, our domestic violence rates are higher, and we could go back into why that is. I don't really know, but I think in terms of us as Black women, I've seen other situations. Doesn't necessarily have to be domestic violence, where we hold so much power to where we could say someone has done something to us, and I don't know if it's ego or what have you, but the Black men that love us and want to see us, live another day, they will do everything in their power to protect us. And there are certain instances where the situation didn't have to occur.
Right. And so I would say this, because I love my daughter. I love my mother. I love my sister. But I'm wise enough to know when anything happens, I'm going to say what happened. Don't give me a narrative. You got to actually tell me what happened. And I'm going to give an example of how this happened with my son and my daughters. My kids are 3 years apart. My son is 15, my daughter's 12. So this is back when they both were in single digits. And I think I was working on something, and my daughter comes into the living room. Brother is being mean to me. She still calls him brother for some reason. And I said, go get him. So I'm like, what I tell you about being mean to your little sister? Da, da, da. She looks up to you. You got to protect her. Da, da, da. So he's like, Dad, I wasn't being mean to her. I'm like, what happened? He said, I just told her I didn't want to play with her right now. So I said, go get your sister. She comes in. I'm like, what happened? Well, I told brother I wanted him to play with me outside, and he said he didn't want to. I'm like, bye, son. Bye, Amir. I said, Z, my daughter's name is Zina, Z for short. I said, your brother not wanting to play with you doesn't mean that he's being mean to you. He's not a toy that you just pick up off the shelf and he has to go outside and run around with you when you want to, right? And so oftentimes what brothers are receiving, what most men receive, is a narrative rather than what actually transpired and took place. There's another sister I was cool with. She was telling me how she broke up with her ex, the baby daddy, and she was like, yeah, we moved out here. He isolated me from my family, and we was living like 60 miles from the city. And I said, first off, he didn't isolate you. He took a job out there and asked you, would you come with him, correct? Yes. So oftentimes there's a narrative that's being crafted and not the actual facts of the case. Right?
But look at how dangerous that is. Like
very much so.
Okay, he took a job, but she made it seem like he was this awful person, that he didn't want her to have friends, that just changed the whole game.
Yeah, so then if I could tell you, I finished the story. So long story short, she said, but I didn't like being out there away from my family. So I started playing manipulative games and making him thinking I was cheating on him. And so then he walked off the job. He was a construction worker to see what I was doing, and he lost the job. I said, well, one, you were acting like a child. You showed up in a relationship as a little girl and not a grown woman, because you could have simply said, honey, this isn't working for me. I miss being close to our family and having the support with our 2 kids. So I'm going to move back to the city. And then what most construction workers do is say, what? I stay on site during the week, and then on the weekend, I drive home and I spend the weekend with my family. Problem solved. But what took place was she showed up in the relationship as a little girl and not as a grown woman. These things happen every day. I can give another example. I met a sister in Columbus. This is probably about a year ago. She was 39, no kids, nice looking sister. And she said that she wanted to have a baby. So I'm like, well, that ain't gonna happen with me, right? And she was like, well, I don't see what the big deal is. Why can't I just have a baby? And I'm like, well, one, women who tend to be single mothers tend to struggle financially, and the child grows up impoverished. What she stated to me was, this is verbatim, was, well, if I'm struggling financially, I would just move a guy in the house. So I said, you're taking one bad decision and you're exacerbating it with another. You move a random man into your home, you don't know what he'll do to your child. And I said, if you get a 30, 40-year-old man who just move in your house at the drop of a dime, that means he's unstable.
Wow, at age 39.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what you, yeah. I said, what in the hell? Hey, what in the HW hockey sticks is wrong with you? So these are some of the problems we're finding. And if you be patriarchal and say, hey, that's a bad decision, guess what? You're trying to control me. I'm a woman, hear me roar. Dumb shit.
I want to say one of the reasons why domestic violence is so high in the Black community is because, and here it goes, when it happens with white women, they go and seek out resources instantly. Black women tend to fight back with their domestic abusers, and the moment that they fight back, they're no longer considered a victim. And so with that being said, the rates of domestic violence are higher in our community, but we're not seeking out the proper resources and help, and half the time we're not. Once we fight back, we're considered a problem.
I don't understand I don't understand what you just said at all. We're
then ourselves considered a domestic abuser. And at that point, we don't always seek out the resources that white women seek out.
What's considered a domestic abuser?
The second, well, when you fight back,
When who
you're
fights
no
back?
longer considered a victim.
When who fights back?
Black women, we have a higher rate of fighting our abusers back.
Okay, well, this is what I'm going to say about domestic violence in the Black community. One, we know that is unfortunate, but a design said what? Come on, tap in, but a design, tap in, be part of the conversation. The second issue is data, facts, and statistics show that domestic violence in the Black community is bi-directional, meaning it happens on both ends. 50%, the statistics show 50% of the time the man is the aggressor and 50% of the time the woman is the aggressor. This isn't a situation where the man is acting like he went to high school with Ike Turner. Today in 2022, now in 1920 was different, but in 2022, domestic violence, not only in the Black community, but throughout America, is bi-directional in nature, in which both parties tend to be aggressors equal amounts of the time. And if you don't believe me, I can email you or put in the chat the paper that was written by Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, where he goes in on this very issue. So this whole idea and concept of Black women or Black men being purveyors and progenitors of domestic violence, these evil, violent, patriarchal men, is not rooted, is not something that's backed up by the data.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that Black men are.
I didn't
Not
say
at all.
I'm just saying that this whole idea and concept of, well, it's because women are fighting back. No, domestic violence in Black communities are bi-directional, just like as that's the case in America today. I've had women, I'm 6 foot, 225 pounds. I work out 6 days a week. I've had women who were 5 foot tall, 120 pounds, try to punch me simply because I disagreed with them about something. It's bi-directional in nature. And it's rooted to what? People not having the skill set and the ability to express how they feel in a healthy manner. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, and disagreeing properly.
Yeah. That's where it comes from. Bump the resources. People don't have these. I had to talk to my daughter about this with her brother. I said, listen, that ain't how you talk to someone that you say you love. That ain't how you respond to someone you say you love. And I made her sit down and practice communicating how she feels in a healthy manner. That's the issue. That's why domestic violence tends to take place. And people tend to just be very disrespectful and engaging in dysfunctional behavior. Because typically when you get around men who are men, you don't have those type of things take place, because we know there is a low-level threat of violence. If I start talking crazy to this man, I'm gonna catch your right hand like his name is Lennox Lewis. But unfortunately in America, because the world has been civilized, women tend to go around popping off, talking crazy, like they Bone Thugs and Harmony, and not expecting anything to happen. But if you took your monkey behind over to Afghanistan or South Korea or Iran, you would see it'd be something totally different.
I must ask, because I've not really been around these types of Black women. Like I have some of the
Hallelujah.
Some of the
Hallelujah.
Some of the examples of Black women that have been given. I've never been around any of these types of Black women. The type to expect her man to go out and like hurt someone, the type that'll just haul off and hit him. I've not been around those types of Black women. So I suppose that my perspective is different.
All you gotta do is watch the news.
But I feel like you can't be naive to the fact that it's happening. Like you may not have been around those type of women, but you can't be naive to the fact that that's what's going on.
Right.
I think it's happening. No, I understand that.
I know it exists.
I understand that. Because it's not just in Black women. It's that white men are having their thing right now with the abuse from white women. Okay, they're having their moment where they're standing up and speaking out against it. So I don't think it's just.
It's bi-directional in nature. That's the statement that I made. Domestic violence, unfortunately, because we shouldn't be having any domestic violence whatsoever, but it tends to be bi-directional in nature.
Since I don't really want to get on the topic of domestic violence, because it really is a nuanced issue, and even when you say violent abuse and violence, I got to kind of tap out of this conversation because my understanding of domestic violence and it might be different than.
That's okay. And another thing that oftentimes isn't talked about in domestic violence is this concept and idea of emotional and verbal violence. We know that oftentimes women are, unfortunately, and this is irrespective of racial or ethnic background, the purveyors of verbal and emotional abuse. Right? I saw an episode of the Kevin Samuels show, God rest, peace be upon the Godfather, right? In which the sister was like, "Oh, I was married and we never had any type of physical issues, but then out of the blue, he just clocked me, and so I filed for divorce." And then after Kevin Samuels questioned her, she finally admitted, well, him hitting me came as a result of me being verbally and emotionally abusive for an elongated period of time. And he was like, well, you just left that out, making it seem like this guy just hit you for no reason. You know what I mean? So this is a big violence that we can define in terms of emotional, verbal, and emotional abuse that tends to take place at the hands of women. But no one typically talks about that. And as a result, man, I'm supposed to shut up. You be tough. You don't talk about how you feel and how you were harmed. And it's been a one-way street. But now we find, man, particularly in the manosphere, speaking out against this type of stuff. Now, this is what I do. I had a situation once. I had a sister over my place. We was having a friendly, robust conversation about religion. She started screaming, yelling. I looked at her and just pointed to the door. And she had to leave. I said, I don't do
why
that.
are you yelling?
I don't do that. Boom. And what I gotta, yes, you do. See, I don't play that type of stuff. One red flag. Listen, in baseball, in my baseball, one strike and you're out. If you ever behave in a manner that's unbecoming, get the hell out of here. Because what I got going on with my children, because I work in an industry in which if there's even a hint of impropriety, you know what, we're just gonna let you go. Yeah. So I don't play any of that in any way, shape, or form. She started talking crazy. In fact, I'll give you a rather colorful example that took place. This is probably a couple months ago, where I told her sister, I don't do the weed thing. If you wear weed, cool, but we're gonna go out to this restaurant, we set this up. Don't have that shit on when I make this reservation. She showed up wearing weave. I got up and left right away. We're not even gonna debate the issue. I told you I wasn't into that. You did it anyway, you're not the person for me. Because really, I was in the catch-22 once again, right? Damn if I do, damn if I don't. If I tell her I'm not in those sisters wearing weave, and I go on a date with her anyway, that means that everything I was saying was hogwash. I don't actually practice what I preach. But if I leave, it means I'm a jerk, and I stood her up, right? So I'm caught in the catch-22. But guess what? If I'm going to be in that catch-22, I'm at the very least going to make sure I do what? I adhere to my values.
And I think I'm a lot biased. I won't say a little biased. I'm a lot biased because I do come from a long line of 2-parent households. Mm-hmm. And then
so do
I am the only girl out of 3. So like it's always been, my spaces have always been like more male than female. And so I've noticed, now that I'm out in the world, I've noticed that like the ways in which I communicate with Black men in particular is always going to be different in ways in which I communicate with Black women.
Right. So Brother Go says weaving and settling it up. No doubt. You're talking about O'Shea Duke Jackson. He always says that, right? Man, I feel you. So with me, I'm just at the age to where I don't tolerate any type of BS whatsoever. One bad, hey, you talk to me crazy, okay, we're good. Never mind. Bye. For real. I just leave you there at the restaurant. I'm out of here.
Because it's not okay. Like people
I just don't do that type
think
of
they could.
That's not the way I move.
Do whatever.
And no, I don't want a white woman. Never have, never will. I would die alone before I be with a woman other than a Black woman. Or I would die alone if I don't marry a Black woman. But that's just not how I work. And the thing is, like I said, my parents been married 45 years. I've never seen my mother behave that way, ever in life. The only time I've seen my mother raise her voice is when she was talking to myself and my siblings, right? I told you behind da-da-da-da. But in terms of her talking and behaving that way with adults, absolutely not. I think it's unbecoming.
Yeah, and even vice versa. Like, my father has never raised his voice even in the slightest at me. So like when another man does it to me, I'm not. No.
Right. In fact, and this is getting more personal, right? Anecdotal, but the first time I saw my parents argue, I was 23 years old. And I remember,
and I'm 27 now. I ain't never seen them argue.
Yeah. And I remember I was at my parents' house and I was picking up like some type of dish because I was going to make something at my house. And they tried to get me in an argument, like, well, she said and he said. I said, I'm out of here. Like, they were trying to get me to take sides. I was like,
right, you want to keep how you
gotta go
live a certain way.
Yeah, like the roles were reversed now. I was the adult and they was the kid. You know what I mean? But that's what happens when you go up in a functional two-parent household, right? But unfortunately, I think what we tend to find happen is there's a lot of dysfunctionalism that takes place, unfortunately, in my opinion, in single-parent households, particularly female-headed households. I've never seen a functional female-headed household ever in my life. And I know this is anecdotal. I haven't been all around the world, but particularly here in America, the results that I see volunteering in the schools, no, it doesn't work.
Because it's not meant for her to do it alone.
No, it's not. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. At all. So it's unfortunate, but I'm going to let you all close out with last words, and then I'm going to pop up off of here.
I don't have anything this time.
Okay, well, make sure you're here next Monday when we have this conversation. So let me ask you this before we go. Would you want a patriarchal man or a man that says that we're going to make decisions together every single time? Or would you want a man that takes the lead?
I would have to say patriarchal.
Okay. Yeah, Ben Carson had a single mother, but we know the exception does not change the rule. My brother Shabazz. Sister Kelly Brown Sugar, what say you? Do you want a patriarchal man or a man that says that we're going to make decisions together every single time?
I'm not sure about the. I think that a man can be patriarchal and decide to make decisions with the woman he's with every time, but essentially, his word can and could trump hers. But so a man that makes a decision. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that one head is enough. I think two heads are better than one. But I think when it comes to execution, I would trust a man's a little more than a woman's decision-making capabilities.
So as Brother Shabazz says, you're basically saying yes.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay.
Because, well, the question that you're asking, would you want someone to consult you on decisions and you make the decision jointly, or do you want one that just takes the lead? And then, but you're saying patriarchal. And so I think that a patriarchal man can also, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both.
Well, when we said this earlier in the broadcast, when I stated that, being a, I'm sorry, love ass you crazy, right? Shout out to the 937. But basically, what we're finding here is a situation in which where being a patriarch means, one, that you're the bottom, you're the foundation. So everything that you say and do must be in the best interest of the family unit. That's number one. In my definition, what a patriarchy is, because that's what I saw growing up in the West Dayton 937, West Dayton Strong. Shout out to Dayton View for life, right? But the second issue is that part of being a patriarch means, yes, you want to have a wife. Most men who are sensible, knowledgeable, intelligent, and principled want a wife, want a mate that is intelligent, that thinks sensibly, right? But however, there may come a time where you have to make command decisions, because as I stated before, the reality of the situation is whenever something goes wrong, the man is going to be the one that is not only possibly blamed, but also expected to solve the problem. And I have mentors. I have a mentor who was a mentee of Dr. John Henry Clark himself, who shared with me when he was married, he had these very issues. He would tell his wife, don't do X, because if you do X, it's going to cause Y, and Y will cause a problem for the family. She would go out and do it anyway. And guess who had to go around and fix the problem? He did, or the family would have been homeless. So with that being said, we're going to close it out. I respect you all for tapping in. Nothing but love. Make sure, yes, homeless sister. So we definitely Appreciate you all tapping in. Make sure you smash the like button as well as subscribe. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Peace.